Hey, get out of the car. I said get out of the car. Right now, you, get out of the car. Okay, look, I don't have much time to talk here. I'm heading to Minnesota, to Minneapolis, to little Mogadishu. Yeah, just taking a new job with ICE, and it's time that we settle things down on the ground before anyone else gets hurt. That shooting of Renee Good was terrible. But you know what was worse than the 3 shots to the head? The worst thing to me was that the ICE agent said, "Hey, you effing bitch." Man, look, shooting people is bad, but words of violence. Like, a lot of people seem to be hung up with the shots to the head. But what about that language, man? We can't have our law enforcement going around calling women such deplorable names. So there's a storm that's coming, all right? The Luke Ford storm heading for Minnesota, and there's going to be a storm and a rain, and we're going to clean up the streets, and we're going to make Minnesota great again, and it's going to get messy. But let's restore the old American WASP virtues, guys.
So we're going to play Renee Good's stepfather after this on CNN saying he doesn't really blame ICE for shooting her 3 times in the face. So that, and by the way, that generation of people, no matter that generation of people is they whatever you want to call them, the boomers, whatever, they are usually, this is what they want. They want their kids to get shot in the face by the cops, and they are glad to go on television and justify it. But let's watch this ICE, the guy with the one eye first.
Been blinded after being shot during a local rally against the shooting death of Renee Good in Minnesota. That Friday night in Santa Ana turned violent.
Want their kids to get... Move that back. Let's just see that video again. They are being violent, the protesters.
Being shot during a local rally against the shooting death of Renee Good in Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, they are being violent. They're being violent. But here we go. This is Renee Good's stepfather. Now, by the way, here's the thing, and nobody wants to hear this. Nobody wants to hear this, and people are not going to like this. Listen up. Listen up. Are you listening? Get close. No step-parent loves you. They don't. They don't. No step-parent loves you. They don't. They like you. They tolerate you. They put up with you. You did not come out of them. You are not their child. They, and this is her father-in-law, right? Okay, this is her father-in-law, former father-in-law. Similar, not quite step relationship. I was wrong about that. But father-in-law, not super close. But he's out there going, this is how my family would react if I was shot in the face. They'd go, well, you know, we don't blame anyone. But let's listen to this guy. This is Renee Good's father-in-law reacting to her getting shot 3 times in the face.
I'm not blaming anybody.
Good.
I mean,
Stop it right there. And I like it. I like it. Move on. Erica Kirk style. That is Erica Kirk coded. That's vibes. I'm not. Run it back again. Let me just hear that first sentence. Give it to me, Daddy.
I'm not blaming anybody.
Damn right you're not. Damn right you're not. Get him a couple of sparklers and a big entrance somewhere. Get him at TPUSA's next event. He's not blaming anyone. He's not blaming anyone. This is what we need. We need more of this. We need more people who can watch their daughter-in-law get shot multiple times in the face and not be that. He doesn't seem that bothered by it.
Okay, so I hate to talk about myself, but I found a comment under one of my videos last week. Sailor Alias 3161 posts, Luke Ford is a genre in and of itself, as if humanity drops the act tells you exactly what you always hoped was not true. And thank God for Gemini. I was able to explain this comment to me. So it's a striking way, guys, of describing the YouTube personality and blogger Luke Ford, who has a reputation for an almost pathological level of transparency and social bluntness. So when the commenter says he is a genre in and of itself, they are suggesting that his content does not fit into standard categories like political commentary or religious blogging. Instead, the genre is simply Luke Ford, a specific, unfiltered way of viewing the world that focuses on status, social dynamics, and the often uncomfortable motivations behind human behavior. The second part of the quote, as if humanity drops the act and tells you exactly what you always hoped was not true, refers to a few core themes in his work. Social realism. Ford often discusses things that people usually keep quiet for the sake of politeness or social cohesion. So this bulletproof vest usually weighs about 20 pounds. No, it always weighs about 20 pounds. But sometimes that really weighs me down, such as when life is not going well, when I'm getting humiliated, when I'm failing, when I'm going down in status and my bank account is dropping. Or when I'm going up in status, life is going well, people appreciate me, there's love and light in my life, then it's like nothing, man. I could walk around all day in this. So Luke Ford frequently analyzes the world through the lens of evolutionary psychology or status closure. He argues that people are often driven by tribalism, hierarchy, and self-interest rather than the lofty ideals they claim. Radical honesty. He's known for broadcasting his own vulnerabilities, social failures, and internal calculations. So here's a hallucination that I had the other day. So I made this deep and meaningful post on Dexter Filkins and the elite chattering class who, from my perspective, they fetishize words. And I have my own fetishes. I got a thing for black fishnet stockings. So I was in a very respectable office the other day, and I saw this woman wearing black fishnet stockings. And my first question is that normal professional office attire? But most importantly, I immediately thought, oh, she's a Luke Ford reader. Like she saw my blog post. She knew I was coming in today, and so she put on the black fishnet stockings. Perhaps people have other reasons for why they dress the way they do. So by dropping the act himself, Luke Ford makes his audience feel like they are seeing the raw, unvarnished reality of the human condition, even when that reality is cynical or depressing. I love this statement in the Talmud. The signature of God is truth. I mean, that's awesome. The hoped wasn't true factor. This suggests that his observations hit on deep-seated fears that perhaps altruism is rare, that social standing is everything, or that people are more transactional than we like to admit. Commentator says that watching Luke Ford feels like a moment of uncomfortable truth, where the mask we all wear in society is stripped away, revealing a version of humanity that is brutally honest but difficult to face. Okay, get out of the car. You got to get out of the car right now. Viewers describe this as social autopsy. Luke Ford operates without the typical social inhibitors that most people use to navigate the world. As my second grade teacher wrote in my report card, Luke Ford is always very willing to share his opinion with the class, but he needs to learn to be more considerate of the slower thinker. One common way his analysis is framed is as an exploration of the sinister reality beneath a glittery facade. This comes up when his audience discusses his work on the porn industry or his critiques of the rootless elites. He focuses on the machinery of social dynamics rather than the stories people tell themselves to justify their actions. His style has some recurring characteristics. The obsession with status closure and status, moving up and down in status. He treats social life like a biological experiment. He looks at who is allowed into certain circles and who is kept out. And he treats these gatekeeping behaviors as the fundamental reality of human interaction. It is the fundamental reality, no? There is a sense he provides unfiltered reporting, while standard biographies or encyclopedic entries focus on his past controversies. His viewers see these same events as evidence of a commitment to a specific type of transparency. Here I stand. I can do no other, so help me God. They view him as a figure who is willing to be the villain in a story if it means exposing how the story is truly written. Social analysis has a low level of agreeableness because he doesn't seem interested in making his audience feel good or maintaining social harmony or firing up the tribe. His commentary feels like a cold splash of water. It's less about persuasion, more about laying out a set of observations regarding tribe and tribalism and self-interest that most people find too impolite to voice. He's a genre of one. His content is not just a lecture or a vlog. It is a continuous live stream process of analyzing the world in real time through a specific, often cynical, sociological lens.
And because that's the kind of the country that we've created. We're a country of feds who really, we love, this idea of the big bad. Oh, the big bad machine. We're going to get you. And they get your daughter-in-law. They're not always going to get brown people in other countries. Sometimes they're going to get your daughter-in-law, and they like it. He doesn't mind it. This is the country that we have now. It's just people that are kind of like, conditioned to go with the feds. It's just what it is. They're conditioned to not really, he's not really holding a grudge. Gotta hold a grudge. So let's listen a little more of him. But this guy kind of inspires me.
Yeah, we have to learn to forgive for good, guys.
He inspires me because I think that's how we all have to internalize everything now, is just know that we will watch the feds kill our friends and family, and that we shouldn't start blaming everyone. Like, let's not play the blame game all the time. Let's just kind of get over it quickly. Run it back again. Now we're going to listen to the whole thing, but run it back because that first line's that heals my heart. He heals my heart. Give it to me.
I'm not blaming anybody.
That's right.
I mean, it's a hard situation all the way around. It's hard for for everybody involved.
Correct.
I mean, the ICE agent, at first I didn't see the footage.
Right.
Where,
and you still didn't blame him. Who cares?
He was actually being ran. I mean, I seen the bumper of the car hitting his leg.
Right, and she was a bitch.
And so in a flash like that, it's hard to say how you would react.
Of course.
From my understanding, he had been through that before, maybe dragged or something.
Maybe he'd been through that before. Interesting.
Like I said,
let's give him a backstory. Let's give him a narrative.
Everybody.
It's a hard situation for everybody. That's going to be the response when you're shot in the face.
Okay, Tim Dillon, ladies and gentlemen. So, do you remember an article that came out in 2002? It was a bit of a shocker, and Steve Saylor helped to contribute to this article. It was by Dr. Sally Satel, and she's a real doctor, an MD. She's not a chiropractor. And the headline was, "I am a racially profiling doctor." My God, that sounds horrible. Can you be more evil than this? And to confess this in the New York Times Sunday magazine, she says, "In practicing medicine, I am not colorblind. I always take note of my patient's race. So do many of my colleagues. We do it because certain diseases and treatment responses cluster by ethnicity. Recognizing these patterns can help us diagnose disease more efficiently, prescribe medications more effectively. When it comes to practicing medicine, stereotyping often works." So, stereotyping often works in medicine. It often works in life. It's not a perfect heuristic, but we have stereotypes usually for a very good reason, because they make navigating life easier, more effective. Right? Who doesn't want to become more effective? So I thought we should do a show on the most socially toxic things to say in America today that are painfully true.
It's an open carry state. It's a concealed carry state. The permits are shall issue permits. The ICE agents have every right to be there. The state and the local government are not cooperating. But boy, oh boy, it's already one dead, and I think it's going to be justified force. But how dangerous a moment is this for the people in the Twin Cities and for Donald Trump?
Well, it's an incredibly dangerous moment for the people in the Twin Cities and for America's federal law enforcement agency, ICE, which is there to enforce the law, to enforce the law against illegal immigration, and in particular against illegal immigrants who have committed violent crimes. You know, amidst all this debate, Hugh, you have to step back and ask, who is responsible for this combustible situation? And I have to say, I don't believe it's either the government, the elected government of Donald Trump, or the agents who are trying to enforce policy and the law who are responsible for this mess we have in Minnesota. I believe it's the elected officials at the local and state level who have turned both Minneapolis and Minnesota at large into a sanctuary for illegal migration, and who are not providing any assistance to the federal law enforcement who are there by an elected government to actually make sure that illegal violence.
The reason that the reason that ICE needs my help right now in Minnesota is because it's not getting any help from local law enforcement, and the critics of this Trump administration being very effective at raising challenges and protests against ICE. And so the more you amp up the pressure, right, the more tension people are under, the more tension I'm under, the more pressure I'm under, the worse I behave. And it's a very dangerous, combustible situation when you've got people with weapons being put under increasing pressure. And you even have some protesters stealing their weapons cache. Woo-hoo! Not a good situation. And it is so contrary to how I was raised, right? As a nice Seventh-day Adventist boy growing up on Seventh-day Adventist college campuses, I was raised that when there's danger or even potential danger, you just get the hell out of there as quickly as possible, and we should all be as kind and loving as Christ-like as possible.
Criminals are taken off the streets. And yet all of the discourse I see is placing blame on the ICE agents. I think that's a complete misallocation of responsibility. And unfortunately, no one at the state level is trying to quiet the situation.
I think it'll be an issue in their governor's race this year. But I have heard that Florida has had 40,000 apprehensions by ICE without an incident, and that is because Florida assists ICE in doing their job. And I just wish that point were made more often. I do think it's a political net negative for Donald Trump.
That's a powerful point, that when local law enforcement assists, then you don't have these dangerous situations, and you have federal law enforcement such as ICE more effectively and efficiently and safely execute their mission.
Do you agree with me, Matt?
I think that you've definitely seen an uptick in people who are leery of some of ICE tactics, and you see people who are like, what's going on? They don't like the chaos. They get into the kind of that cocoon, that crouch, that defensive crouch. Make it stop, right?
Yeah.
But look, Q, think of 2020. In the summer of 2020, amidst all the rioting, people thought, oh, Trump might be hurt by all of this chaos. What happened in the 2020 election? Republicans overperformed. Why? Because at the end of the day, voters want law and order. They don't want anarchy and violence. And the anarchy and violence that we're seeing in Minnesota right now, yeah, it might hurt Donald Trump in some of these polls we're looking at. But in the long term, if the Democrats are on the side of abolish ICE and contest and open borders and allow illegal violence.
Doggone it, this thing is heavy. Just imagine wearing it for 8 hours. So the other day I was wearing it for a few hours, and then as I was running through some exercises, like there was this, well, these muscles were really tight. What's that called when your muscles just like seize up, and it's like, wow, not working so smoothly anymore. Oh, not a cramp. What's the term? It happened to me about 8 years ago, and it was so bad I couldn't lift my feet like more than an inch off the ground. I was shuffling around like an 80-year-old man, and that is not how an exemplar of the Alexander technique should be operating. So you stretch or strain, you try to do the right thing, right? You try to clean up the streets, try to help people out, and then, doggone it, a spasm. I had muscles in spasm, like particularly at night. My toes go into spasm, and my feet go into spasm. And I want to be free. I want to be a fair dinkum American. I want to be free. I don't like having these unexpected muscular spasms. Right? What goes on with your body affects your mind. Your mind's in your body. Right? Tight mind, tight body, tight body. You'll have tendencies to have tight feelings and a tight mind. I want my my thinking to be free and easy. I want my morals to be stern and hard, but my thinking should be free and easy.
Want criminals to remain in place, the Democrats are going to suffer.
From your word, from your lips to the ears of every voter, stay tuned. I'll be right back with Matt Continetti.
So, Continetti is my favorite, daily pundit, even though he's not daily anymore since he's no longer on the Commentary Magazine daily podcast. But if you're going to opine on the news every day in polite society, I think Continetti does as good a job.
Yeah, we're talking
today. Golden Dome aside, and that's a big deal on Golden Dome because hypersonics can come over the pole and regular ICBMs come over the pole, but because there's a 230-mile exclusive economic zone around every one of the 27,000 miles of shoreline that Greenland has. And that's fishing and that's oil, but fishing primarily. And then today, the Select Committee on China did me a solid by putting out the report on Chinese overfishing, that they are predators. They destroy environments. Do you think the message is getting past the late-night comics that this is a serious issue?
Hard to say. It's hard to go out there and see who is in favor of Donald Trump's policy toward Greenland, other than President Trump. And I mean, I would like Greenland as well. I think it's extremely important geopolitically, economically, as you say, in terms of the resources where we.
It's just, what an amazing time to be alive, mate. Yeah, there are problems. But I never thought we'd be talking so seriously about the United States taking Greenland, the United States knocking off the Ayatollahs, the United States taking out the leading Mexican drug cartels, the ending of NATO. My God, we now have the Civil Rights Division of the federal government looking into anti-white discrimination. What a time to be alive. So, Sally Satel, iconoclastic doctor, wrote this very controversial piece in the New York Times Magazine in 2002. I am a racially profiling doctor. So, how do her contentions hold up 24 years later? Well, in terms of truth, she was spot on, mate. But, yes, it's also very inconvenient. So, with regard to pharmacological and diagnostic precision, right? Her core logic has been vindicated. But in social and systemic analysis, the medical establishment has shifted. And have they done this primarily on the basis of effective medicine and the pursuit of truth and goodness? No. Right? It's driven by a woke agenda. So certain drugs work differently for different groups. So we have ACE inhibitors for hypertension, right? Not so effective for black patients compared to white or Asian patients. People of East Asian descent are at significantly higher risk for severe skin reactions to certain gout medications due to specific genetic variants. So if a doctor ignores race, he is failing to use the most efficient diagnostic shortcut available. Well, what about it in life? Sometimes, my God, noting someone's race is the most efficient diagnostic shortcut available. It's blunt, it's imperfect, but it's the way nature works. It's the way people works, right? You look at nature and a whole bunch of stuff is color-coded, and we're part of nature. And we naturally tend to look at the world and think, oh, who's on my side and who's a challenge, who's an enemy. So critics say, now we can't acknowledge these painful truths because doctor might see a black patient and immediately think black diseases, and he might miss that the patient's symptoms are really driven by pollution and food deserts and the chronic stress of dealing with hostile white discrimination. So in 2005, you had the FDA approve for the first time a drug marketed specifically for a single race, right? It was called Bidil. It's for black Americans with heart failure. The drug was a commercial failure, right? Doctors didn't like any kind of race-based marketing for pharmaceutical companies. So now the polite way to talk about all this is precision medicine, right? You don't look at race, right? You look at ancestry. You look at the individual specific genome. You don't say, oh, you're black, take this. You say, oh, you've got the CYP2D6 gene variant, so take this. Now, not everyone gets their full genome sequenced at the bedside, so race remains a powerful, if blunt, proxy. And most doctors still use it, God forbid, as a starting point. So Sally Satel's piece is aged into a classic inconvenient truth. It is biologically, medically irresponsible to ignore the patterns that race provides. And there may be some truth here, not just for doctors, but for other groups and other people. So how about a list of the most socially toxic, inconvenient truths in America? Right? And I got this from Gemini. I can't believe how fair dinkum honest Gemini is. Gemini 3.0 has been a revelation. I am just a huge fan of Gemini 3.0. So, number one, answer from Gemini here. This is how they phrase it, the variance in human capital. But another way of phrasing that is different groups have different gifts. Right? The dominant American narrative is built on the premise that any disparity in outcome is a direct result of systemic bias or lack of opportunity. Well, that is the dominant American narrative among elites and the highly educated. I think most people have a sense that different groups have different gifts. The inconvenient truth is that individuals and groups possess varying levels of cognitive ability. This is Gemini. Don't blame me, mate. I'm just telling you what Gemini said. My God. Different groups possess different levels of conscientiousness. So I'm thinking about Japanese sports fans after a World Cup event when they go pick up the trash, right? They go around a stadium and they pick up the trash. I don't think English soccer fans typically go to a European match and then pick up the trash afterwards. And that so varying levels of cognitive ability, conscientiousness, and cultural heritage directly impact their performance in high-tech knowledge economies. So we currently have a no-fly zone over all sorts of inconvenient truths. And here I stand. This is what I support. Let's do away with the no-fly zone when it comes to telling truth, even if it's painful, right? Let's do away with the no-fly zone, forbidding the discussion of group-level differences in traits like IQ or future time orientation. Maybe it's okay to recognize that different groups have different gifts, and that these differences remain the most powerful predictor of socioeconomic status. And maybe it's not the economic structure, the political system. Maybe different groups have different gifts. Maybe ignoring these essential and partly biological variables leads to social policies that are perpetually surprised by their own failure. This is the number one answer that Gemini gives me for socially toxic but inconvenient truth. Next answer, the fragility of multicultural peace. So the elite mainstream media pushes a story about diversity as a strength, right? The less we have in common with our fellow citizens, the better. So strong. I know when I get off the plane after spending some time in a homogeneous country and I fly back into LAX, oh man, I really get the sense that diversity is our strength when many of the people I ride the bus with, right, don't even speak English. Such a strength for LA. Right? A multitude of competing cultural, religious, and racial identities just naturally creates a more vibrant and stable society. Not true. Toxic reality is that high levels of diversity, the less we have in common with each other, right, the less social trust we have, and the more tribalistic we get. Right? In highly diverse communities, people hunker down, according to Robert Putnam, trust their neighbors less, and become less likely to invest in the collective good. So the peace in a multicultural society is often a fragile state maintained by a dominant professional class, very strict speech codes, and it can fracture rapidly when economic or security pressures mount. So you can have peace if you can exert certain levers, but then the situation changes, and no matter how much you push on those levers, right, maybe you can no longer have peace. And accompanying that, these are all along the same lines, the limits of social mobility. So we have a myth in America, anyone can rise to the top through hard work. There's no correlation between hard work and success. If you work hard, but you work in the wrong way, doing the wrong thing for the wrong employer or clients, it's not going to work out well. You can exercise too much, right? You can overdo anything, right? Social mobility is pretty stagnant, and our success is heavily determined by our genetics, in our family, in our extended family, in our tribe, in our community, in our culture. So success comes from a cocktail of genetics, family, extended family, and inherited social networks. So we are increasingly a hereditary meritocracy. We've got the children of the elite groomed for success, the children of the working class left in crumbling institutions. And for most people, the game, you could argue, is just over before it even begins. What about the dysgenics of modern life? My God, Gemini here is talking about we are getting dumber. We have dysgenic reproduction patterns. This is Gemini. Don't blame me, mate. There is a profound silence regarding the demographic trends of the 21st century. The most educated and intelligent individuals, according to Gemini, are having the fewest children, and the dumbest people are having the most. Gemini didn't say dumb. They called them least resourced and least educated. I noticed that when elite people talk about dumb people, they prefer to call them uneducated. If only they had more education. So the traits that allow for success in complex civilizations are being selected against. Discussing the long-term impact of these reproductive patterns is eugenics and is strictly forbidden. But the statistical reality suggests a slow erosion of the very human capital that maintains a high-functioning society. Wow, toxic, painful, inconvenient truth here from Gemini. How about another inconvenient truth? The inefficiency of our professional managerial class. So a significant portion of our economy is dedicated to the administrative bloat, right? This massive layer of HR professionals, DEI consultants, middle managers who don't really produce anything but regulate social interactions and institutional compliance. Much of this work not terribly productive, even you could argue actively parasitic. It increases costs. You could say it stifles innovation. It protects the status, tenure of the credential class. Critiquing this group is difficult because they are the same people who control the decoder rings of the media and the legal system. Right. Maybe the male-female pay gap is a preference gap. So we have a narrative, women earn less than men due to systemic sexism. Right. That's a political staple. The inconvenient truth is that the vast majority of the pay gap is explained by individual choices and biological priorities. Women often prioritize flexibility, safety, their children, their relationships. Men are more likely to pursue high risk, high stress, and socially isolating work for higher pay. And when you control for these variables, the male-female pay gap disappears. So once you admit equal representations in all fields is an impossible goal because different groups have different gifts, you are at war with human nature when you try to promote equal representation in all fields. Painful, inconvenient, socially toxic truth. All right, let's go to the chat. I take no drugs. Thousands of years of culture and breeding has actually affected the human race. Evolution has produced cultural differences. You mean that when different groups evolve in different circumstances that they develop certain traits? Maybe this is why I'm good at building things like highways, buildings, and automobiles. I can remember building a bunch of houses on the reservation. As soon as they were finished, the people in the reservation busted holes in the walls, filled the bathtubs up so the horses could get drunk out of the bathtub. We had similar situations in Australia. We often built homes for Aboriginals, and then the Aboriginals tore them apart. I'm not saying that all Aboriginals tear apart buildings. I'm saying it happened in certain places at certain times. I'm not saying it's just intrinsic to any group to just tear up a house. When corporate mergers happen, HR department employees are getting laid off. Sad but true. Another painful truth, the failure of the deinstitutionalization movement, meaning moving the mentally ill from mental institutions in favor of community care, has been a humanitarian disaster for the most severely mentally ill. Right? Without a benevolent container, these crazed individuals are funneled into the prison system, or they live in squalid conditions on the streets. When I go back to Australia, in Sydney, I might go weeks without seeing one homeless person. Right? The narrative, everyone is capable of just total autonomy, right, ignores reality. Certain segment of our population, the most mentally ill, require permanent, structured care. But we have this enormous social stigma against mental asylums, and that prevents the only humane solution. What about the moral hazard of compassion? We've got all these compassion-led policies about homelessness, drug use, petty crime. It is destroying the public commons. Society cannot function without a baseline of enforcement and social shame. So if you diminish and remove the consequences for antisocial behavior in the name of equity or harm reduction, right? You are incentivizing bad behavior. You've created a toxic feedback loop where the more compassion the state shows to the individual actor, the more the community suffers. Or you may have well-meaning NGOs and religious organizations that subsidize dysfunctional behavior and hand out money and good things to homeless and even incentivize this bad behavior. The decline of the American educational system. Finally, the wash of modern philosophy. So many of our modern wisdoms, from stoicism to mindfulness to polarity, are awash for the general population. Right? You're not supposed to say this. We want to believe that there's a hack, there's a philosophical trick that can solve the friction of human life. Reality is most people are governed by their genetics, their temperament, their early imprinting, their family, extended family community, their environment, and no amount of mindfulness can replace a stable job, a safe neighborhood, a coherent family. Yet we continue to sell these internal solutions because they are easier than fixing the social external collapse. So why does race in much of life function as a proxy? My God, what if it correlates with a high density of other variables, socioeconomic status, educational attainment, geography, life patterns, cultural habits, educational history, that are more difficult or intrusive to measure directly? So when people use race as a proxy, they are using a single visible marker as a shortcut to predict a complex cluster of invisible traits. That's racist. That's terrible. So sad. Now, this might create efficiency, but certainly violates many social norms that I learned at university. So race has been a blunt proxy for risk and life expectancy. Actuaries use race to explicitly deny coverage or set higher premiums, or they used to when that was legal, right? Actuaries said the statistical reality of lower life expectancy among, say, African Americans made them uninsurable. Now, this is illegal, but it's a powerful implicit proxy through variables. It's now transmuted to, oh, I live in a very expensive neighborhood where prices discriminate, so I don't have to. Zip codes, right? So proxy for property risk, likelihood of claims, and it maps directly into racial residential patterns. Credit scores, right? Predicts responsibility. Credit scores are highly correlated with race. Algorithms in healthcare, hiring, criminal justice, right? They are more efficient, effective, and accurate when they use race. Algorithms predict high crime areas, often on the base of race. Credit and lending. Who's more likely to pay back a loan? Lenders used to use race. Now they have to use proxies for race. So certain groups get charged higher interest rates because they are a bigger credit risk. In education, race has long been used as a proxy for intellectual and educational attainment. And the assumption is a person's race is a reliable indicator of specific life experiences, outlooks, and challenges. Marketing, consumer analytics, right? Maybe it's not just doctors who racially profile.
Think about building up our stockpile of rare earth minerals. They are plentiful in Greenland. It's important. But the type of approach Trump is taking to Greenland, I don't see much public support for in the polls or in Congress even. What I do see is this, a parallel between Donald Trump's approach to Greenland in the second term and his approach to NATO in the first term. Remember, Hugh, when Donald Trump started telling NATO that they needed to ante up, they need to begin contributing to the burden of defense in the European continent and in the alliance at large, the Europeans screamed. They protested, and we were treated to endless news cycles about, is Donald Trump going to destroy NATO? Donald Trump against our allies. Well, what was the net result? They're paying the 5%. And it was a it was a difficult process. It was a contested process. But at the end of the day, NATO was stronger for the Donald Trump's intervention than it was before. I wouldn't be surprised that if at the end of Donald Trump's second term, NATO is committed to Greenland's defense, there's a much larger American presence here. America has a greater role in Greenland's economy and has a secure foothold in it geopolitically. And that will be the result, despite all of the battling and negotiations and crying, just like we saw in the first term, over defense spending overall.
Now, by the time we talk again, Matt Cotney, we'll be past the 1-year anniversary of Donald.
So I would like more truth-telling, even if it's painful and inconvenient. I believe that accurate criticism makes individuals and groups better. I would like a more transparent, more accountable society, right? I would like to stop wasting money on ridiculous policies that ignore group differences. We could have better healthcare, better education, more honesty, and we would have more efficient institutions. And I think we'd have increased social trust. And do we really get this huge social lubricant from the egalitarian model that is at war with reality? Would it just destroy people's self-esteem if they learned that their group had certain strengths and certain weaknesses? So I would like a little more honesty, even if it's uncomfortable. We live in a complex world. With more honesty, it's easier to navigate. So here are some of the problems with the lack of honesty. Australians get into a lot of trouble when they visit America because they don't realize there are bad areas, because there aren't really very many bad areas in Australia. But in America, every American knows there are a lot of bad places that you just don't want to go because it's really dangerous. And I also notice women in some very dangerous cities living in very dangerous neighborhoods because, the rent's so cheap. And they go live in a bad neighborhood where the rent is cheap because they buy into this egalitarian nonsense. So will honesty be the tonic that heals society, or will honesty be the toxin that dissolves our society? Where do you stand, right? I am down with honesty is the toxin that will heal our society, right? I don't like this no-fly zone over vital parts of life. You could never criticize Jews or blacks or any oppressed minority or gays or the trans community or anyone because this group is so vulnerable and they've suffered, and therefore we need a no-fly zone over any kind of critique or criticism of this group. The essence of woke is that there are certain groups that should be immune from criticism, public criticism of group characteristics. And I don't think that serves us, whether you're a member of a historically marginalized community or not. I don't like these no-fly zones, right? The Luke Ford genre is a all-fly zone, right? We get to talk about all the uncomfortable topics.
Trump's second term. So he's got first year done next Tuesday. Who's the best communicator after the president and the vice president and Secretary Rubio? They're 1, 2, and 3 in whatever order you want to go. Who communicates well on behalf of this administration?
Well, I think Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt is a fantastic press secretary and an excellent communicator. I think if you're looking at other cabinet members, Hugh, I think Secretary Duffy at Transportation has been very good, very effective. And Secretary Hegseth has definitely achieved the goal that Donald Trump gave him at the outset of his second term, which is reinvigorate America's military. And so we see that because of Hegseth's personality and his dynamism, among other factors, recruitment has shot back up and the services are fulfilling their goals. And
I'm not some kind of a big Pete Hegseth fan. Right? I thought he was a terrible choice to lead the U.S. Defense Department. And I still think that. But he's probably done some things right. So lots of very strong, very valid, important criticisms to make of Donald Trump, this Trump administration. Pete Hegseth seems like a ridiculous leader of the Pentagon, but someone can be a ridiculous leader or a ridiculous person or a flawed person or a fool or wrong about a whole bunch of things, but that doesn't mean there's not some nuance here. it's good to get some nuance here from Continetti that there are things to praise and to respect about what Pete Hegseth has done at the Pentagon. My favorite reporter and commentator, and I think most even-handed commentator on Donald Trump and on American politics for the past 25 years is your friend of mine, Mark Halperin.
Occurred on here on Earth since, let's say, 1988. Since 1988, what would you say the three biggest news stories are? 9/11? Tom Brady? Just kidding. I mean, I don't know. You know, because it's hard to quantify what's a big news story. But
so I love it when Halperin begins his show just in media, like right in the middle of things. He doesn't introduce. He just goes right into his thought. I think it's a terrific technique.
This is what got me thinking about this is Donald Trump's presence on the world stage for a decade now as a political figure. And I think it's the biggest news story of my career. I said 1988. That's when my career started. Really started.
I also love his manner. He seems like a happy warrior. Like he's fair and he's upbeat. He's a good model, mate.
In 87, but whatever. When in election night in 2016, I was on Stephen Colbert, and it appeared Trump was going to win, and I said, if Donald Trump wins, it'll be a more cataclysmic story than 9/11. And people gave me crap for that because they said, oh, worse than 9/11. I didn't say it was worse. I said more cataclysmic. And the most prescient thing I've said, maybe in my whole career, was that, because this is cataclysmic. Look up the definition. It doesn't mean bad. It just means big change, I think, if I remember correctly. But that's what I meant by cataclysmic. And for many Americans, again, people started saying to me during Trump's first term, the election of Donald Trump is the worst. They would say the worst thing that ever happened to me, they would say. And I would say, you mean the worst thing that's happened in our country or in politics? No. They'd say the worst thing that's ever happened to them personally. Now more than ever, for some Minnesotans, like to say it that way, Minnesotans, I just cannot believe what a big story this is. No one has written an accurate story or book or article.
That's a fascinating idea that for millions of Americans, is that right? The worst thing that has ever happened to them personally is the election of Donald J. Trump. Right? I'm trad. Right? I'm convert to Orthodox Judaism. I'm conservative. I would expect that the individual's primary concern is his family, his extended family, his job, his career, his profession, his education, his community, his friends. That your primary concern in life is politics. Right? If it's fun and rewarding for you, as it is for me, like I love politics. I love talking about it and thinking about it, but it's fun. My happiness level was not significantly diminished by the election of Joe Biden, right? For 48 hours, right, it went down. Maybe my happiness level was reduced 1%. On the other hand, I got to admit, I think the happiest moment of my life was when Donald Trump won the 2016 election. I mean, even if it was a disastrous choice, it was funny. And if you can't do anything about it, like, why not laugh? So what on earth is going on for people who tell you, and who seem to mean it, that the biggest disaster of their life is the election of Donald Trump?
Article about what Donald Trump is really like that I've ever read. And no one has written a book or a magazine story. Josh Shapiro, oh no, it's from a different thing. About Trump's impact on society and on the world. It's kind of incredible to me that no one's written that. Perhaps I should take a hiatus from this program and the two-way platform and write it, because I feel I have a decent handle on it, but not total. In any event, so much happened today, and we try not to make every story about Donald Trump, but a lot of stories today are about Donald Trump. He talked not once, not twice, not 3 times. He talked 4 times today to the television cameras and made a lot of news on a lot of topics. So we'll be going through that.
I just think this is an excellent model for conducting yourself, talking about controversial topics. Like, don't get all down. recognize different people have different hero systems. They're going to experience life differently. They're going to have different reactions to Donald Trump. So this is incredible news.
Sam, if we do, throw it up there. Here it is. This is kind of incredible news. Justice Department is investigating Minnesota officials, including Governor Tim Walz, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, for impeding federal immigration agents. So Donald Trump has been bandying about the concept that these guys might be investigated. But now Jennifer, who's a very good and fair reporter, says that the Justice Department has opened an investigation.
So if you're watching this show, I doubt that the election of Donald Trump is the biggest catastrophe that you have ever experienced personally. But let's try to understand millions of our fellow Americans for whom that is true. Like, what's going on here? Because it seems to me, in a practical matter, it doesn't really matter that much who's president of the United States. It's not going to affect you. So I think what we primarily have here is the psychic pain of the collapse of your hero system, of your transcendent way of making sense of life, and that gives meaning to the mundane details of your life, because you see your life within this broader, transcendent, eternal matrix of order and value. So Ernest Becker, in his great book, The Denial of Death, he says, we manage our fear of mortality by attaching ourselves to immortality projects. And it doesn't have to be religious. It can be democracy, pursuit of science, truth, the sanctity of institutions, the moral evolution of society. And when Donald Trump comes along and mocks and dismantles these structures, right, he's not just changing the law, right? He is ripping people up inside who have a particular hero system, right? He is destroying that which protects millions of Americans from existential dread, that their lives have no meaning, purpose, that they don't matter. Because it's hard to argue that our life has great transcendent eternal meaning in and of ourselves, we have to attach ourselves to these immortality projects. And so if your sense of self-worth is tied to the idea that you live in a stable, rational, and good country, right? Donald Trump comes along and says our institutions are corrupt. He disrupts. He violates traditional norms, right? That's going to feel like an assault on your very identity, right? Your economic and physical life may not only remain unchanged, it may even get better, but the erosion of your shared hero system makes you feel significant. Not so much, right? You suddenly feel naked before your own insignificance, right? You just have to live stream on YouTube and watch the numbers drop from 15 to 12 to 9 to 3. So for many people, the worst thing is this sudden awareness that all the stories they relied on for meaning in life were fragile or false, right? We're driven by terror of our own mortality, so we build hero systems and immortality projects. We cling to cultural frameworks, to belief systems, to religions, to roles that make us feel like we're part of something permanent and significant, right? If you believe in the progress of democracy, the sanctity of our institutions, I wonder how many people get a great deal of meaning and purpose and comfort in life from the independence of the Federal Reserve, right? That the moral arc of history is bending in a particular direction, right? This hero system gives your life meaning beyond your physical existence, right? Maybe the United States of America is your primary immortality project. It's not just a collection of laws. It's a noble experiment in Enlightenment values and civil rights, right? This is the first multiracial true democracy. I think Irving Kristol would say things like that. Then you have Donald Trump, and he's a wrecking ball to the aesthetic and behavioral norms of your hero system. He mocks the rituals that you've valorized. He challenges the dignity of high office. He's not just changing policies. He's destroying the hero system that gives your life meaning and purpose and comfort. And this is why the reaction to Trump is so visceral and out of proportion. Right? If your sense of self-worth is tied to the idea of a particular system dominating the United States, that we have ever-increasing civil rights and progress, now we've got a leader who thrives on chaos and embraces all sorts of low-status behavior and outlooks and eats at McDonald's, right? We have an annihilation of the self, right? Your hero system has proved to be a farce, and you are left naked before your own insignificance. You feel vulnerable. And maybe you realize that your hero system is a fiction. The elite, the most highly educated, believe in the buffered sense of identity that we can just decide right and wrong within our own heads. The most important things are inside of us, the ability to choose right and wrong and to strategically, autonomously, rationally plot our way through life. Now, there are many benefits to this fictional identity, but the reality is we are porous, that what goes on outside of us affects us, shapes us. Even when I'm all alone, 3 a.m., I get up, have a cup of coffee, I'm more driven to develop my thoughts for today's live stream. And when I'm doing that and I'm all alone, I'm still profoundly affected by my most important relationships and by the communities that I belong to.
And again, people have started talking about this as a civil war, and I thought it was hyperbolic until about 12 hours ago, and now I think it may be apt. There's so much tension there and around the country. And so people in Blue America will look at this report and they say it's another abuse of justice, another weaponization of the Justice Department, another act of lawfare by Donald Trump. And people in Red America will say, well, they're obstructing the lawful conduct of the federal government. The 10th Amendment doesn't apply in cases where the federal government's enforcing the law. And you want to talk about lawfare. They tried to put Donald Trump in prison with 4 separate indictments by Democratic prosecutors. I can say all this in my sleep, as can most of you. But this is it's an extraordinary moment, what's going on in Minnesota. And for a week now, people have said, de-escalate. No, we're escalating. So we'll talk a lot about that.
All right, let's have a look at the chat. Robert Walters says, look, you were happy, you were fine under Biden because you were not affected by all the crime that he brought in. I was affected, bro. I get unhappy when I can't understand anybody on the job site. True, right? The more we have in common with other people, the happier we will be, the more effective we'll be, the more public-spirited we will be. And when you're happy, you naturally tend to help other people. Like, I can be quite selfish, but when I'm happy, I'm more outgoing and I enjoy being helpful and kind and considerate. Robert says, I become happy when everybody on the job site speaks English and they work efficiently. Fair dinkum. That makes sense to me. Now, there's some important truths that we should learn from hawkers.
There's something that successful escorts under...
Okay, this is my favorite doctor, Dr. Fiona Gray. She specializes in men's sexual health. And I don't care that she's AI. I think she's
understand on a visceral level that most married women completely miss. And when I say successful, I'm talking about the real professionals, women who made a career out of understanding men, intimacy, and emotional connection. What these women know, what they live and breathe in their work, is that their actions and their inactions have consequences. And understanding this one principle could save your marriage before it's too late. I'm Dr. Fiona Gray, your trusted men's health advisor. Here's what we're covering today. First, why the escort-client dynamic reveals something crucial about human behavior that applies to every relationship. Then, the dangerous illusion that keeps many wives complacent while their marriages slowly die. And finally, what you as a man need to understand about consequences and why your tolerance might be destroying the very thing you're trying to protect. Understanding this first is what separates men who see real results from men who waste decades.
So my first question, my primary concern is not, oh, is this AI or is this not AI? My primary question is value. And I'm getting a lot of value from this video. And I don't care that it's AI.
Hoping things will magically improve. Hit that subscribe button because what we're covering today, a sex worker, you know with absolute clarity that if you're disrespectful to a client, if you're cold, shut down, or unprepared for his visit, he might give you one more chance. Maybe 2 if he's really into you. But after that, he's gone because he knows he has options. Every escort understands this reality because it's just the nature of the business. The relationship between an escort and a client is literal. It's based on mutual clarity. It's not fuzzy or emotional in the way that a marriage can become. It's defined. He pays, she gives him her time, attention, and access to her body. Now, listen carefully. I'm not here to discuss the legality or morality of sex work, or whether you should be seeing escorts. That's not the point. What actually happens here is something most people, men and women alike, don't understand. Human behavior doesn't run on feelings alone. It runs on consequences. In sex work, you learn this early because it's common sense. You're not the only option in town. Even the most successful escorts are very aware that there are literally thousands of other women who are younger, more attractive, and less expensive. The women who thrive in that industry are the ones who understand this reality completely. You have to show up as your best, not because you're afraid to lose a client, but because you respect him and you respect yourself. And because you understand the reality that you are replaceable. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Let's take this whole concept that actions have consequences and drop it into the context of marriage. There are a lot of women, especially the ones who got married when they were young, in their early 20s, who still carry this unspoken belief that they're still the hot girl. Even though they're now in their 40s and 50s, and sure, they're still attractive, they assume their appeal in the broader market hasn't changed. They think of themselves as that head turner, as the one with all the options. Pay attention to this. A lot of women don't realize how much their dating pool shrinks with age. They don't think about it that way. They don't think about competition.
God forbid, this is Torah. This is truth. This is powerful. This is excellent. This needs more discussion. We need public policy and personal behavior and all sorts of things to take into consideration everything that this wonderful AI doctor is telling us.
They don't think about the fact that for most middle-aged women, the dating pool has gotten significantly smaller and far more competitive once you're out of the marriage bubble. But because they still get attention from their trainer at the gym, their tennis coach, the guy at Whole Foods, or their friends' husbands who flirt with them.
Right. Super cynical Bob Altberger says, is this AI rage-baiting women? There may be an element of that, but what this AI is giving us is truth. It's powerful. It's important.
They think they've still got it. They think their man's not going anywhere. But wait, there's something else happening here that's critically important. What they're confusing is sexual attention with relationship value. They're mistaking being flirted with for being chosen. They're confusing desire with devotion. This is a dangerous illusion. Just because a man wants to sleep with them doesn't mean he wants to commit to them. And that's a massive blind spot for a lot of married women. And it leads to complacency. It leads to entitlement. And it leads to a lot of good men feeling ignored, neglected, and taken for granted. Let me clear up a massive misunderstanding about why this happens. Our brains are wired for consequences. This isn't just a cultural thing or a female thing, it's a human thing. People change when there's a reason to change. If there's no reason, there's no change. That's just the basis of how we learn from childhood. We learn how to behave by having our good behavior rewarded and our undesirable behavior punished. This is how habits form, good or bad. It's also how all adults subconsciously gauge what's acceptable in a relationship. So when a woman gets in a bad mood and withholds intimacy for months or years and nothing happens, when there are no clear boundaries, no shifts, no standards being upheld, she unconsciously...
All right, I have a painful, humiliating truth to share with you. One evening, my girlfriend put on black fishnet stockings, and as a result, I had an erection that lasted longer than 3 hours, so she had to drive me to the hospital, to the ER, to have my priapism ministered to by a medical professional, and the person who ended up ministering to my problem was this wonderful Dr. Fiona Gray.
...assumes he must be okay with this. She doesn't feel the consequences of her actions, so why would she change? The reality is, some women aren't paying attention, and it's not always malicious. Sometimes it's simple behavioral reinforcement. You've taught her through your inaction, your silence.
Yes, we have a profound effect on how other people treat us. We don't get to determine how other people treat us, but we have a profound effect on how other people treat us. I love Dr. Fiona Gray. All right, she's sharing some important truths here, and I want public policy revolving around these insights. Right, that actions have consequences, and we should incentivize as a society pro-social behavior, and we should disincentivize and punish antisocial behavior. Maybe we need to end monopolies on public service, such as the California Department of Motor Vehicles, right? If bureaucrats and public institutions are not getting the job done, maybe we need to open up that market, right? We all need rewards and punishments. Maybe we need performance-based budgeting, right? Maybe we need more market signals. Right, maybe we need a consequence-based framework for governance. Not exactly sure what that would look like, but I have some intuitions. It means most forms of status closure that dominate our society today do not increase merit and do not increase human dignity. And so if a form of status closure does not do that, then we should get rid of it. This Trump administration at its best is creating status openings and increasing the dignity of the average American. So instead of running the economy based on these abstract principles of economics that exist and work primarily in certain types of differential equations and other forms of mathematics, but instead we're creating a society and an economy that aims primarily at increasing the dignity for more and more Americans. To me, that's a good thing. That should be the path forward for the right, for the left, for the center, right? Let's reward good behavior, punish undesirable behavior. Fair dinkum.
You're enduring this situation, that she can keep giving you less and still keep you. And this is where it gets critical for good men, especially nice guys. You're part of the reason your wife thinks she can neglect you without consequence. Not because you're weak or bad, but because you've tried so hard to be good, to be dependable, to hold the line, to do the right thing, that you've stayed in a situation that stopped serving you a long time ago. You've been showing up with no affection, no intimacy, no passion in your life. You're still paying the bills, doing the chores, being the good husband. And what she's learned from that is she can keep giving you less and you'll stay.
All right, words to think about. Sally Satel, great doctor, and she's written some powerful books, and she explains here to Bridget Fetisi how political correctness is corrupting medicine.
I ended up writing a book called PCMD, How Political Correctness is Corrupting Medicine. That was 2000.
It's so crazy.
And then later on, I wrote a book with Christina Hoff Sommers called One Nation Under Therapy. But in 1995, what really got my attention was the fact that San Francisco General Hospital had divided up its inpatient units by racial categories. So if you were a Black person, you went to what they called the Black focus unit. If you were Asian, you went to the Asian focus unit, and Hispanic, and there wasn't a unit for white men.
So that doesn't strike me as a productive use of race. Right? There are times when race is an important, helpful, and useful way to sift reality, and it's a useful heuristic, but this doesn't strike me as helpful.
But they did find beds for them, of course. But but the premise was so, in my view, so pernicious. I mean, the idea behind that, and also behind an institution called multicultural counseling, which the first textbook on that came out in 1981, is that someone of another race couldn't understand you, that the patient wouldn't be able to relate, and we know that a therapeutic alliance is.
So usually the more you have in common with somebody, the more likely you are to get along. But sometimes the best person for me to talk to is someone who's quite different from me. It's the Black guy, it's the gay guy, it's the woman, it's someone with a completely different life experience. So having things in common, yeah, generally a good idea. But sometimes sorting on race or sorting on heritage or ancestry or religion, right? Not the ideal way to operate.
Essential for care, and that the clinician would not understand. And I'll grant you, of course, there are some situations in which what I would call clinical anthropology is very important. I mean, if you're going to work on an Indian reservation, you certainly better learn a lot about the customs and how people think about illness, how they think about medication, how they even discuss their problems with their family, the extent to which they share their concerns with their family. I mean, there's just a lot of subtlety. Some of it is culture bound. There's no question about it. But there's also an enormous universality to this dynamic of illness and mental illness. And this kind of philosophy, that only people of your own category, really your own tribe, your own group can understand you is just, well, A, it's not even true. Mm-hmm. And B, it so undermines really the human project. So, right. So that was my first familiarity with it. And then I remember reading a lot about the idea that white doctors were prejudiced against Black patients, and that this figured prominently in a real problem, which goes by the name of health disparities or health gap, which is that, minorities in general have less access to care, have poorer health outcomes.
So maybe this isn't the fault of white people, but maybe different groups have different gifts, different susceptibilities, different life history patterns. And I think Charles Taylor's distinction between the Buffett and the porous identity is just a sharp lens for understanding the world. So from the Buffett perspective, the most important things in life, such as morality and strategy, is inside of yourself. And from a porous perspective, right, the most important things in life are outside of you. So the Buffett perspective on life is follow your bliss. And the trad perspective, the porous perspective, is do your duty. So from the porous perspective, from a trad perspective, the religious perspective, right, the most important things in life are outside of you, such as a moral code, such as how you should conduct yourself, what's important, what's valuable. These are all standards that exist outside of yourself, and your duty is to move towards these external structures and to align yourself with these transcendent moral principles and laws. So the more educated you are, the more likely you are to believe in the Buffett identity, which is a fiction, a useful fiction. And now with the election of Donald Trump, it has forced all these elite Americans with elite educations to recognize the fictional nature of their Buffett identity. Because with the Buffett identity, you have a sense of mastery, right? You get to decide what's right and wrong. You get to be rational and strategic and autonomous, and you don't have to be held down by all these primitive medieval Americans clinging to their guns and religion. You get to choose, and you don't have to be contaminated by all the idiocy around you. But when you recognize that this is a fiction that may not serve you any longer, maybe you realize that you no longer are the master of your own meaning in life, right? So the election of Donald Trump is ripping apart this psychological installation. So all these elites and the highly educated now feel exposed to a world they thought was managed by rational, predictable, reliable, peer-reviewed institutions. So now the highly educated are experiencing the same quavering network of terrors that ordinary Americans feel when they fear they won't be able to get a job, or that everything that they held sacred is being polluted. It's embarrassing. It's low status. It's socially toxic to admit this. But for me, the most upsetting thing that I ever see on TV is two men kissing. And there's no necessarily inherent reason why it should be, but for my psyche, I just have a stronger sense of revulsion than like seeing people hung or stabbed to death or shot or disemboweled, right? All of that is like, I have a less visceral reaction to that than suddenly, without being prepared, like two men start kissing, and it's a shock to my hero system. And for those of us who are trad or religious or believe in the porous identity, right, the rise of same-sex marriage and the rise of work culture, it has upset us. We have many quavering network of terrors that now the Buffett elites are experiencing. So the opponents of Donald Trump feel invaded by Trumpism, while supporters of Trump have moved into identity fusion. So for them, the boundary between themselves and the leader has become blurred. So for Trump's opponents, his presence and his conquests and his pronouncements are invasive, and they feel like personal attacks. And so both sides of the political spectrum are moving away from the fictional, detached, autonomous, strategic, rational, buffered self and recognizing that their highly reactive, porous reality, where national drama is direct and it has immediate, intimate significance for their life, and they didn't want this. So the keepers of the buffered identity have been the highly educated, right? You get that elite university education, and you get to have distance from the chaotic forces of the world. But now, no matter how educated you are, the chaos of the world is intruding on you. So you thought the meaning of things was stable. You thought life was managed by competent experts. But now you see the experts and the institutions have lost their authority, and they're even being openly mocked by the highest levels of government. And you've lost your psychological shield. You can no longer disengage from the national rhetoric by morons and primitive people. The news is no longer, for you, an external data point. Now, every day, it's an internal emotional intrusion. So the stress levels among the highly educated are going up, 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 and they might even exceed those of regular working class Americans. So for normal working class American, I would expect that their internal sense of self is primarily regulated by their family, extended family, and community and job. But now the highly educated, the buffered, the elite, they've been shifted away from dispassionate buffered observer status towards a highly activated emotional and reactive stance that they thought they'd graduated from this. Right? The boundary between what I do and who I am has been thinned. And many of the privileges that came with status closure and credential power are being cut away with the rise of artificial intelligence. The decisions made by this Trump administration, many forms of credentialing and status closure are being reduced. And now AI is allowing people to rise to the level of their own abilities, even if they don't possess elite degrees and elite credentials. And so we have a mental health crisis, perhaps among much of our elite. They now feel the social, political stress that was primarily holding down the working class. So now we have this frantic search for new immortality projects, and it may manifest as extreme political activism, going to war with ICE, or an obsession with the ethical or human elements of work that AI allegedly will not touch, right? They're trying to rebuild the buffer and prove that the human expert still possesses a divine spark that the machine lacks. So even the most buffered are moving towards a tribal or local focus, trying to get that resilient sense of purpose, trying to find value in immediate human interactions, in craftsmanship, in service, in activism. They're no longer protected by all these forms of status closure. So the hyper-educated are trading their abstract immortality projects for grounded, more local ways of living. Both sides of the spectrum are embracing the vulnerability and excitement of the porous identity. So we're having an intense period of introspection among our elites because their self-esteem, their distinction, and their safety is being challenged.
It's not in every category, but in many. A lot of that really is socioeconomic. Some percentage of it may be racial. And then a colleague and I looked at all the studies that purported.
So what happened to me last Sunday? I was sick, mate. Came down sick Friday night, took 3 days off. Didn't do anything productive. I just listened to Alan Allport's book on the British Empire during World War II. I watched some football, and I'm back, bro.
To to make the case that doctors were prejudiced against patients. And the most conservative thing we could say from reading all these studies is, hey, you didn't prove it. Of course, there's going to be individual situations, but you didn't prove it. And there are so many other explanations that are far more powerful, and they're the ones that we can work on. And so that was the beginning of my interest in, what used to be called political correctness, and which I define as political correctness as an orthodoxy that's intended to maintain a victim status. Now it's kind of morphed more into what people call woke. And I know that now you have to put air quotes around that word.
Yeah.
I think we all kind of...
I love what Gemini told me about this notion that you shouldn't have open critiques of all groups, that some groups, due to their marginalized status, that because of past suffering, that they are now exempt from any group criticism. And Gemini described this as a no-fly zone for outside critique. I don't think that serves these particular groups, and I don't think it serves society. I don't like the no-fly zone for outside critique. I don't like pulling punches, because among the problems this creates is that institutions get to hide facts. They get to spin narratives. So if we had open, honest, accurate reporting on all groups, on all matters in the public interest, such as public health, right? If we were brutally honest about what drives disease and crime and failure, right? All sorts of sacred truths pushed by our most elite will be recognized for what they are, as fictions that are used to promote the distinctive interests of certain people, but certainly not in the public interest. So maybe if we had more honest reporting on viruses like monkeypox and AIDS and other viruses that are spread by specific high-risk sexual networks, right? Maybe people would make better decisions, right? Instead of issuing vague warnings for the general public, maybe if you engage in a lot of piss orgies, you are at risk of the following. And you might have fewer Rube Goldberg social policies when you tell those with power you can't analyze things like IQ, biology, cultural habits, different groups of different gifts, family structures, life patterns, right? Then you get all these ridiculous, overly complex theories to try to explain social outcomes that are far removed from the truth, right? If you tell the truth, it simplifies the diagnosis and it simplifies the cure. So if we have public policies that are failing, it's probably because these policies are built on fiction, not on fact. So the no-fly zone around critiquing certain behaviors in certain parts of the gay community, right? I don't think that serves the gay community. I don't think it serves the public, right? There are behaviors such as awesome amounts of sexual promiscuity that tend to make one much more vulnerable to certain diseases. And it's not good for society. Right? If a behavior is dangerous, it should be identified regardless of who is doing it. But instead, our elites have a vulnerability-first model where certain groups get to be exempt from public criticism. And this creates blind spots, and the news media doesn't talk about dangerous, destructive ways of life because they want to reduce stigma. So what's more dangerous, stigma or piss orgies? What about the risk of the spread of disease by being vague about what's causing and spreading the disease? Right now, the institutional elite consensus is stigma is the greatest evil. To me, dishonesty when it comes to matters in the public interest is the greatest evil.
You don't know what it means, but I'll say that what it means in medicine is that every difference in outcome is inevitably attributed to systemic racism. Some of it might be, and maybe a lot of it is, in a sense, in that you can draw, you can connect the dots between systemic unfair treatment in the past and how it has related to, let's say, fewer medical services in a certain neighborhood, or pharmacies, and all that. So I'll concede that in some cases you certainly could draw, that kind of a pathway, but from the standpoint of a clinician, that's not where we operate. We can't.
I hate how public spaces are being destroyed by those who aren't using earbuds and headphones, right? Don't play your music and don't play stuff right? When you're in public, when you're riding on a bus or a train, you're in a park that is blasting out there. For keep it cool, bro. Keep it in your earbuds. Keep it in your headphones. And I guess the lower IQ don't know how to pair their earbuds to their phone, or the lower your IQ, the less capacity you have for empathy, and the less clearly you see the future, and less likely you are to be incentivized to maintain the public sphere as a place of trust and safety, right? The blasting out of rap music when I'm trying to enjoy a nice pastoral walk is not a good thing. Bob agrees with me. Playing music without headphones, all right? These headphone dodges creates a great deal of annoyance. I'm with you, mate.
We can't do anything about systemic racism as doctors. We can work with the patient in front of us. We can work with the fact that maybe it is much harder.
Yes, and when you don't have open, honest, all-fly zones with regard to all groups and all matters in the public interest, then people are often incentivized to buy into these fictional narratives that the biggest problem for their group is, for example, white oppression or systemic racism, when what's going on is something much more painful and difficult to discuss, but more important.
For certain folks to get to clinics, so there are, and this is being done, so we beef up the kind of transportation that brings people in. If some people have problems paying their electric bill, and that means that the some medication has to be refrigerated, and that's a problem, we work on that. We work on practical problems. And in fact, the clinicians don't work on it per se, but we have to know about it. And when I was trained in medical school, we didn't spend that much time on what's called today the social determinants of health, which is largely the context in which the person lives. And I just gave 2 examples. Another very big one for people for pediatricians is treating asthma in kids, and how roaches and housing problems, the allergens from the roaches is really an irritant to asthma.
Oh, wow.
That's really important to know. That's really
I had no idea that was the case.
Yeah, so that's important. I'm not saying the doctors.
So when I was bedridden by chronic fatigue syndrome between age 18 and, between age 22 to 28, 21 to 27, I wonder how many of my doctors told me to move on from my vegetarian diet. I know that I'm pretty sure 1 or 2 did, but that was what was the primary cause of my health problems, because as soon as I started taking these beef organ capsules, all my health problems went away. And that relates somehow. Russ Douthat is the most interesting columnist in the elite media, certainly at the New York Times. He's not a Trumper. He's not MAGA, but frequently thoughtful, and he speaks in an indoor voice so that even liberals can listen to him. And I know from my audience, their favorite thing out of everything wonderful, transcendent, beautiful, and clarifying that I do, their favorite thing is when I play the AI voice.
Trump's second term has ended the conservative era. This article is by Ross Douthat and read by an automated voice.
Yay!
Donald Trump spent his first term as the frustrated caretaker of the decaying Victorian mansion called the American Conservative Movement, floating plans to tear it down and build anew, but mostly just knocking down a few walls, adding a gilded bathroom, doing some renovations that the residents had long desired. The Federalist Society ballroom got a special shine-up, while letting mold and time do its work on the limited government wing. His second term has been a different story. The smoke of demolition is everywhere. Cranes are swinging wildly.
And Ricardo, what a good friend Ricardo has been. He throws down a $10 super chat. Blessings. That is how I begin many of my interactions with many of my friends from the online world. We've been all profoundly shaped by our Rebbe Dooovid. Blessings. Who is your all-time favorite person from the porn scene? Well, Kendra Jade was very special to me, and she was like the heroine of my memoir. So she rose to prominence around 1998 when Jerry Springer was set up to appear that he was getting into bed with Kendra and her stepmother, and she did some very edgy work, but she was smart. I've never dated any woman who didn't like reading books, and Kendra Jade was a porn star, but she was a smart porn star, and she loved reading books. She loved reading about serial killers, and she loved remarking how much I reminded her of various serial killers. So she was funny, she was a good friend, she was insightful, and after the first time we had sex, she said, Lukey, do you know how the mainstream media, when they talk about porn stars, they say that we're all sexually abused? Well, that's true. Because when I have sex, I kind of float above my body up to the top of the ceiling, and I'm kind of like looking down on myself. So I also dated Haley Rivers after she left the industry. And so she was the daughter of an English teacher. She was well-educated, articulate, good company, and my friends loved her. Right? My elite writer friends, so between 2002 and 2007, when my good friend Kathy Sipe died of lung cancer, but my social life from 2002 to 2007 was primarily among very smart, capable writers who earned a living through writing, and Haley Rivers was adored by them. They much preferred Haley Rivers to perhaps my more beautiful girlfriend, I only once had a girlfriend that many of my male friends tried to have sex with, and they couldn't help themselves because she was smoking hot, but women hated her. My female friends hated her because they thought she was entitled, that she would talk to them like a peer when she didn't have the track record, and they felt their brain slowing down when they tried to talk to her, and they hated that she had this look that said to me, "You can do anything to me, Luke." So Haley and Kendra Jade. Oh, there was a bloke, Quasar Man, who was a director, videographer. He was hilarious. And I used to do a podcast back then in 2002, 2003. And various people who were enemies in the porn industry would call up to the show and they would sing songs about their enemy. And so Quasar Man and a male performer, I think with the first name Jeremy, they would sing, they'd join the show, and then they'd sing a song about how much they hate the other person. And it was transcendent music. It warmed the soul. So a good quality about people in the porn industry is they tend to be unpretentious. They tend to be open and honest in some ways with each other. And so they are really funny. And they may not have a great deal of social cachet and status, but at least they see through the bullshit. And they're just so fun. And it's like a dysfunctional family. And God forbid, there was a part of me that felt, I'm at home here. Because you could just drop the pretensions and you could just keep it real. And just like I would assume heroin addicts sometimes form a dysfunctional family, and people in the porn industry would form a dysfunctional family. John Doe, right, the male performer, he was fair dinkum, right? He was unpretentious, and he enjoyed talking to writers. And the comic Yoshi Obayashi, right? I met him, I think, January 1999 at the adult version of the Consumer Electronics Show. And he loves to read. And he knows Dexter Filkins. And he knows all sorts of writers. And he's been working in and around the industry for a long time. He's got a side gig as a comic. And he had me on his podcast. Oh, he was on the Joe Rogan show. Yoshi Obayashi. He's from Korea, and apparently he's banned in Japan. So he's been a good friend. Like I still, he's the only person from the porn industry that I've stayed in touch with. Like with pretty much everybody else, right? Those ties are gone.
Podcast right now. 3 Japanese women away. I just made that up. I'm sorry.
I thought maybe this was a COVID policy.
No, fuck no. Why is he so far away?
Wait, why? What? It's this far?
Your face that way.
What, you want me to move?
Turn.
All right.
Towards me. Is that okay, Joe? Is that better? Talking to the microphone, Joe. Can't hear you. Have headphones on.
Yeah. I'm very, Bobby, I'm not antisocial.
You are.
I really am.
Yoshi, it's been
he's just been a good friend, mate. Like when I call him, he's in Jerusalem. He's in Ukraine. He's in those little Russia-dominated countries next to Ukraine. He goes to Afghanistan. He goes all over the world, right? And he loves writers.
It's been a long time.
Has it?
Yep.
Come on, guys.
I mean, like 10 years ago, to go to Japan with him, and I told him, like, I feel a little uncomfortable doing that because I could get arrested. So I said no to Joe.
You said no to Joe, and you said yes to Russell Peters' brother?
I mean, they've done so much for me.
They have.
Yeah, but I don't know. I was a little worried about 10 years ago, but, by the time I went last year, it was pushing 20 years. I thought I was all right.
Is there a statute of limitation on breaking a twat bone?
I don't think there is such thing as statute of limitation. But here's the thing. Some people keep asking me, well, why don't you find out if they're looking for you? Here's the problem.
How would you do that?
The very act of asking them will put them in a position they have to do something now.
That's gotten me into a lot of trouble in my life. Like asking about things, right, just creates trouble.
That would remind them that's there. 100%. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
But it was still unnerving, and
because you're going. Listen, people don't know a little.
I had an on-again, off-again relationship with photographer Holly Randall between last few months of 2006, early months of 2007. We were narcissists in love. We were both writers. She did a degree in English literature from UCLA. She was funny. She loved her mother, Suze Randall, and Humphrey Knipe, her father, who wrote a novel about Caligula. And so it pains me to share this, Ricardo, but Holly touched a part of me that you will never see. I shared parts of myself with Holly, with Kendra, with Haley, that I'm never going to share with you. And it's not a slam on you, mate. There's nothing wrong with you, but you're a bloke.
Context to all this. Last time
I don't want
to bring it up.
Yeah.
I'm just going to context.
Yeah.
That's all. Can I bring up some context? Some stuff happened.
Yes.
Last time you were in Japan, family things, whatever. Some
2003.
Stuff.
Yeah.
2003, a long time ago.
Yeah.
When you were a different person.
Yes.
So Yoshi used to be close with David Cho. I think they went on Joe Rogan together, and David Cho, the artist, was given Facebook stock very early on, and it brought him tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars. And it's often hard to maintain friendships when you inherit tens of millions of dollars, I've heard. Ricardo says, okay, so how do we feel about America officially taking direct control over the entire Western Hemisphere? Is Trump doing this for the American people or for Israel? So if it works, that's my primary concern. Does it work? Not does it fulfill this or that theory? I don't support and I don't oppose Donald Trump's intervention in Venezuela and his bombing of Iran. So I am concerned. I have questions. I don't think Trump is primarily driven by Israel. I think Donald Trump's relationship to Jews and to the Jewish state is highly pragmatic. Right? He likes short men with little caps overseeing his money. Right? He recognizes that there are many Jews who are very good at accounting and real estate and finance. And so I think Donald Trump recognizes that different groups have different gifts. And I don't think that Trump took out Maduro for Israel. I love a magic key as much as the next guy, but Jews and Israel are not usually the magic key to what's going on in the world. Now, I want American foreign policy operating primarily on the basis of what is good for the United States. And the United States and Israel have some interests in common at times, and other times they have interests in direct contradiction. So I think Trump's foreign policy is driven primarily by, one, what he regards as good for America, and two, he has an insatiable desire for attention and for having things named after him and for gaudy, glittery, look at me stuff. And he wants to be significant. He wants to be epochal. Is that the right? He wants to usher in and have an entire era named after him. So the idea that a pragmatic transactionalist such as Donald Trump is primarily driven by the Israel lobby or by his Zionism doesn't ring true to me.
And you got into some shit and you left Japan. I'm never going back. I can never go back. Some stuff happened.
But do you know what happened?
I do.
Because people talk about this stuff. I was in Taipei, ready to fly into Osaka, Japan. So I'm a little nervous, because I haven't been back in Japan about almost 20 years at that point. This is like last year.
Yeah.
At the terminal, everyone's Asian, obviously, except a couple, I don't know, minority. Well, they're minorities in Asia, but blacks and white folks,
Yeah.
And I'm talking to one of my friends on the phone, and this one white guy keep looking at me and like, what is this? 5 minutes later, I'm talking to, I don't remember who I was talking to. He walked up to me and say, "Are you Yoshi?" And I was like,
So you get, in public life, you frequently get the most honest commentary and reporting about race from stand-up comics. So I think it's quite possible that Trump's bombing of the Iranian nuclear facilities and his taking out of Maduro may very well be in America's interest. It is possible that his tariff regime will be aligned with America's interests, that his threats against NATO very likely are in America's interest. Okay, if you put me to the wall and put a gun to my face and said, look, you have to define your position, I prefer Donald Trump's foreign policy to the foreign policy of any American president in 100 years, right? Who's done better, bro? Who's done better than Donald Trump with regard to managing American interests? Okay, let's keep things highbrow here. This is a very highbrow show.
If this were happening to Governor Shapiro or some of the other governors, I think some would be doing poorly too. But if this is happening in Pennsylvania or California or Michigan or Colorado, there's a way to articulate what's going on from the Democratic point of view that's better than that they've done. And I think not just the Democrats, but I think the country's poorer for it because there are some massive constitutional issues here. There's some moral issues. There's some separation of power issues. And it's all overwhelmed by the student body right efficiency of MAGA, of the president and of his allies in the state, of his allies.
Who ever thought that we'd say the words MAGA and efficiency in the same sentence? Right? It blows my mind how sometimes efficient and effective this version of the Trump presidency is. I never expected efficiency and MAGA to go together because normally populism is often popular but not competent and not efficient. But now we're getting populism that is sometimes quite efficient and quite competent. I find it amazing that how Donald Trump's just doing things, both foreign and domestic, that doesn't need Congress to wage war in the Caribbean, caps interest rates, dumps billions into... Yeah, it's just... He's taking action. Now, the word fetishists and the institutionalists and the elites say sometimes that Donald Trump isn't significant because he's not passing legislation, right? The true measure of the significance of a presidency is passing legislation. I think it's entirely possible that passing legislation is not the most important, effective, efficient thing that a president can do. Maybe it is moral suasion or just challenging norms or executive actions. I don't share the word fetishism. I don't share the fetishism of legislation. I don't think it's automatically true that passing legislation, that's the very most important thing that you can ever possibly do.
Eyes on the media is a mismatch. It's a mismatch. Democrats wonder, they say Trump is a Hitler. He's the worst president ever. The economy's horrible. His policies are horrible. And his poll numbers suggest that. Another poll from CNN
Anyone
today
here
suggests
willing
that.
to join
And yet
ICE?
every poll shows Democrats are less popular.
Ricardo, I'm sorry you're late to the show. I just joined ICE, mate. I took the 2-hour training course. I've been issued with a weapon. I'll pick it up when I get off the plane in Minneapolis. I've been given entire blocks that I am to take over a little Mogadishu. I was given a bulletproof vest. Right? You think I'm just wearing this because it's slimming? It's part of my outfit. I don't need all that elite credentialed training and stuff, right? I took the 2-hour video training. I'm ready to go to work for ICE. I'm ready to be a warrior. Let me go get my vest, mate.
Than Republicans. How could you be a Democrat? How could you deal with the cognitive dissonance? We're less popular than Hitler in a free country where everybody sees everything Donald Trump does. How do you live yourself? How do you live yourself? How do you not do, as David Plouffe did in his New York Times op-ed piece, how do you not do some soul searching? We're less popular than Hitler. It's just kind of incredible. Anyway, we're going to talk about Minnesota. Again, I'm eager to hear what our guests think about Amy Klobuchar's long statement in reaction to the recent events. She was on MS Now last night. Remember, every time I say MSNBC, I have to put $40,000 in the swear jar. I almost said it, but I didn't. And when I said it just now, it was in quotes. MS Now, Klobuchar was on last night. She spoke again today, finally out of her hibernation. So we'll look at that. We'll look at what polymarket wagers think about the prospect that the president might.
So there's so much ageism out there, mate. So much age discrimination in hiring, but good on ICE, like giving a 59-year-old bloke a fair go. Right, I got my gloves. These are bulletproof gloves. I just have to put my hand out. They'll stop a bullet. I got my bulletproof vest. I'm picking up my gun at the airport. I've taken my 2-hour training. I've got the blocks that I'm going to be controlling in Little Mogadishu in Minneapolis. I mean, ICE is giving this 59-year-old man a new start in life, and I am so proud to go to work for this great president, Donald J. Trump. And you don't need those, fancy training things. You just 2 hours, man. That's all I need, and it's time to go clean up the streets. Let's make Minnesota great again.
Vote might invoke the Insurrection Act. And we're going to talk about other topics. The Fed. I'm so interested. I want to write a biography of Donald Trump that it's entirely made up of his statements about the Fed. Once again, today, he threw a monkey wrench into those who disregard me when I say it is probably not going to be Kevin Hassett. I've never said 0%, but I've said it probably won't be for a variety of reasons. And today, at a public event at the White House...
We have the bite.
Okay, at a public event at the White House today, the president said this.
For years, they've been working on it. And I see Kevin's in the audience, and I just want to thank you. You were fantastic on television today. I actually want to keep you where you are, if you want to know the truth. Kevin Hassett is so good. I'm saying, wait a minute. If I move him, these Fed guys, certainly the one we have now, they don't talk much. I would lose you. It's a serious concern to me. So I just want to say thank you very much. You've done incredible. We don't want to lose him, Susie. But we'll see how it all works out, okay? Thank you, Kevin. Great job.
Thank you, Kevin. Great job. I've said to you folks, look at the history of Donald Trump in personnel. He almost never picks someone who he passes over in the process. They say, well, pick Kevin Hassett. Well, no, I'm not going to pick him. He almost never doubles back. Other presidents double back all the time. Well, we can't find anybody better. Trump just doesn't like to do that. And I've been skeptical for a variety of reasons. Kevin Hassett has a ton of enemies, not personal enemies. I shouldn't say enemies. It's a ton.
And Ricardo says, Trump is FDR. Who is going to resist him? He has an army of domestic enforcers that are personally loyal to him. Is anyone in this chat willing to join ICE if they paid $150K a year? Yeah. Trump has more control over foreign policy. Domestic policy is not so much control. Trump uses the velvet glove over the iron fist. How much fun would that be to go to work for ICE? Trump is going to pay us to clean up Minnesota. The vest, you need to grab the flex bar and improve that trigger grip. Officer Ford. Officer Ford will see you now. Excuse me. Get out of the car. Get out of the mother effing car. That effing bitch. Don't mess with me. Oh, look, Trump may be wrong. Trump may be right, but he is so funny. He is just so much fun. How awesome is this that we get to be alive now? Sweet. It's sweet.
Scott Besson said the president will announce his Fed pick either before he goes to Davos or when he returns. Yes, unless he announces it at Davos, I guess. Remember, he doesn't have to announce his pick till like April or March. And Donald Trump rarely makes decisions early. He did during the transition. He did a lot of personnel early, and it momentarily made me rethink the whole cosmos.
It's so fun to have an even-handed analysis of Trump because Trump is so polarizing that people tend to veer off in either support or opposition just automatically. And with Halperin, he does this superb job of just following the truth. I would have so much fun working for ICE, but I think I'm too old, still stronger than half the guys my age. Officer Ford will see you now. My father, he had 2 PhDs, but he was not a medical doctor, but he liked to be known as Dr. Ford. So there was Dr. Ford, and now his son, Officer Ford, who will see you now.
Become experts in housing policy, which is part of now this whole woke agenda, is that doctors should be very involved in what's called upstream factors, income inequality and all these kinds of things. They can do that on their own time, of course. You
right.
can be an activist for anything.
So you think, wow, Sally Satel, what a voice. She should do phone sex, God forbid. Here she is talking to God Assad.
These people aren't going anywhere, and I feel that is so important to make clear.
Got it. Can I
yes.
move to just psychiatry in general? So let me give you a bit of a personal story. So at one point when I was trying to decide what I would study, I was very much interested in so I had done a undergraduate degree, very technical, mathematics, computer science, and now I have to kind of decide what's my next step. And for a short period of time, I was interested in maybe going into psychiatry, so going to medical school and so on. Several things dissuaded me, and I discussed this in one of my books. One was that I felt that I didn't have the right personality.
So for years, between about 2009 and 2015, my deepest, darkest fantasy was to go to university and get an MFA in writing, a Master's of Fine Arts. And I talked to this fantasy with a friend of mine who had a PhD in English literature. And I said, but my greatest concern is there are certain things you shouldn't write about or say or talk about. And essentially the Overton window is too narrow in the academy to me to encouraged me to pursue truth no matter how unpopular, and my friend agreed.
To be able to actually probably not commit suicide after a few years of hearing about children being abused by their uncle and neighbor, that I would probably care too much. But the second reason, and you'll forgive me if this sounds pejorative to the field, as being someone who was very scientifically minded, and I don't mean scientifically in that I want to take anatomy and physiology, in the scientific method, in rigorous thinking. Is this born by the data, by the theoretical framework? I have here's a book that I wanted to show you why Freud was wrong. Okay, we're going back a while here. Here's another one that I don't know if you know this one, by an anthropologist, right? Okay. And I mean, I've got an incredibly big library of books on, psychiatry. And probably the book that had most influenced me was, at that point I'd already made my decision, but House of Cards by Robin Dawes, who was trained as a clinical psychologist, if I'm not mistaken, who said that, look, much of the stuff is pure quackery. Now, it doesn't mean that, of course, the pharmacological intervention for paranoid schizophrenia is quackery, but the history of mental health profession is so filled with junk that I certainly decided it wasn't right for me to go into it. As I say this, what's your reaction? Do you agree with it? Do you feel that it's a lot less quackery now? Where are we in the quack?
You can't offend me. Don't worry. No, it's very, we're still embroiled in the diagnosis wars. We don't even have a taxonomy. I mean, we do have the DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. The first one came out, I think, in 1952. The first two editions were very Freudian. So to the point where almost symptoms didn't matter. It's really, the underlying.
I remember in 2002, I was going through a difficult period. It seemed like many Orthodox synagogues didn't want me. And I realized I was saying a lot of inappropriate things. And I went to see a psychiatrist and said, I got a problem. I've got narcissism. I got a bad doc. And I said these inappropriate things. A friend who'd exiled me from her home, decided to give me a second chance. And she had me over on Sukkot, and here I was sitting next to this woman, and I asked her if she'd like to shake my lulav, which is this citrus branch. It's a holy ritual, but I guess she took it as some kind of, God forbid, sexual double entendre. And my host was just giving me a second chance, and I'd let her down again, and then she died of horrible cancer afterwards. And I think what I said in the sukkah gave her deadly cancer. I said, Doc, now perhaps we may begin. I got a problem. I got narcissism. I got it bad. And he put me on lithium. And lithium's not a cure for narcissism, but it just calmed me down, because much of my life I've oscillated between feeling invulnerable, that there are no consequences that are going to hold me down. There are no consequences for me. I'm just free to be me. So that's my manic side. And then there's my downside, where nothing I do matters. I'll never be able to escape this matrix of hell that I've created for myself. But when I got on the lithium, I bloated up 10 pounds, right? My face got puffy. I started drooling a little bit. I didn't smell good. You could smell the lithium off my skin, but I was more socially appropriate. So I was on lithium between, I think, 2002, 2009, and I didn't like what it did to my bloating in my face and all the puffy stuff, but I liked the even out. So I'd take my lithium until I felt I was too bloated, then I'd go off it, and then I recognized that I was getting manic. God forbid, I was in a Torah class and I started touching this woman under the table, not against her will, but I realized I was feeling manic, and so I said, oh man, I better get back on the lithium. And my girlfriend would say, you need to stay on the lithium, mate. You're too vain. You're more worried about your puffy face rather than the inappropriate things you say and do.
Conflicts and the derailed, developmental trajectories. That was really where it was at. The symptoms were almost irrelevant. And then in DSM-3, it became more scientific. And I with all due respect to Robert Spitzer, who, the late Bob Spitzer, who devoted his life to the manual, in a sense, and to diagnosis. I mean, it did become a lot better. And when it became much better, it was reliability. Not validity, but reliability. So if two people looked at the DSM and then interviewed a patient, the odds were good that they both come up with the same diagnosis.
Right.
What that meant, obviously there's a difference between, severe OCD and PTSD. And
so I love this Ross Douthat column, how Trump's second term has ended the conservative era. And I think that's good. I prefer an American right that is more focused on nationalism. I don't think that we have these deep genetic tendencies to have strong opinions on marginal tax rates. I think that the protection of the country, the end to declining social trust. So let's start emphasizing things we have in common. Let's increase the dignity of Americans. Let's reduce maladaptive forms of state disclosure. Let's open up opportunities so that even people without the credentials can still have an opportunity to achieve through the merit of their work. I think these are all good things. Let's increase the dignity of our fellow American. I think that is a productive path forward for the American right, and it is a better path than trying to follow in the footsteps of Reagan.
And if the shape of the original building is still vaguely visible through the smoke, it's clear that the final renovation is going to be radical. More of the original residents have fled to nearby properties. You can see a bunch of them clustered in the Mike Pence gazebo. while others have barricaded themselves inside the true conservatism suite, where folks are pouring tea and wearing earplugs. A bunch of newcomers are throwing up competing additions. The AI tower is a shiny spire overshadowing the based medieval...
So I don't care that 80% of people have a negative view on AI. AI is powerful. AI is useful. America needs to lead the way with AI because of its military applications, its productivity applications. American worker productivity jumped about 5% in the last quarter of 2025. And I just find it hilarious how, as Ross Douthat notes, Trump has made the old institutions of movement conservatism, the think tanks, the magazines, even Fox News, seem irrelevant. He's presiding over a transition to the new forms forged in imitation of his success. The world where podcasters and influencers and online celebrities set the terms of conservative debate. That's not new. That's what William F. Buckley was. He wasn't an intellectual. He was an influencer. He was an entertainer. When I was back in Australia, one bloke who was a lifeguard, he said, I wouldn't want to live in LA. Too many influencers. So Trump is a more significant and transformative figure than a Jimmy Carter, but according to Douthat, he's not as significant as a Reagan or a Roosevelt, who each gave their era its full shape. For one thing, Trump is not popular, and Republicans don't seem positioned to achieve decade-plus of dominance that we associate with the Reagan and New Deal coalitions. So what's the proper path forward for the American right? And I say let's focus on increasing social cohesion, social trust, and dignity. Let's enforce the law. Let's punish people doing bad things. Let's reduce immigration. Let's end illegal immigration. Let's go after criminals and gangs. And should American foreign policy be isolationist or realist or imperialist, depending on the situation? There are some situations where you want to follow realist principles, but there's no one theory that is adequate for the complexity of life. Right? Sometimes one theory will be 90% applicable, and then for the next bewildering situation, it won't be applicable at all. So there's a time and a place for intervention, and maybe the military raid in Venezuela and ousting Maduro and taking over Greenland, maybe these are all good ideas. So I don't think isolationism, realism, though I would consider myself a realist, but isolationism, imperialism, realism, right, they are theories that are useful to varying degrees depending on the situation. So place me primarily in the situationist model. I am fine with getting out from NATO, or at least reducing our commitments. I'm fine with America focusing primarily on its vital interests. Should the American right embrace AI and the tech sector, or should it embrace the popular thing and be anti-AI? Well, I'm not a populist, not an elitist. Sometimes the people are right, sometimes the elite are right. I say follow the path of merit and dignity, increasing social cohesion, social trust, and making it possible for Americans to marry and have children and increase the quality of life, because they live in a safe place where if they work and are productive, they can pay the bills and take care of their families. So let's enhance human dignity. Let's reduce state disclosure and the demanding of unnecessary credentials. Now, should the American right be all about white identity, or should it be multiracial? Well, by favoring merit and reducing unnecessary forms of state disclosure and reducing unnecessary demands for credentials, and by seeking to make the application of law racially blind, you can appeal both to those whites who feel and have good reason to have the realization that often they've been the recipients of anti-white discrimination. So by ending anti-white discrimination, you can appeal both to those who feel victimized by that, and to a broader coalition that likes a focus on merit and the colorblind application of laws, the end of affirmative action, the end of unnecessary forms of state disclosure, the end of unnecessary demands for credentials. So from the working class to immigrants to white Americans to black Americans to brown Americans, I think a path forward of increasing dignity and merit and social cohesion, social trust, and readjusting social incentives to push people towards making good decisions and punishing them for making terrible decisions, that this would be a winning path forward for both sides.
And manic depression. I mean, there clearly are differences in symptoms that you would group as tending to occur together. But there's so much overlap. There's so much comorbidity. People who have one diagnosis will have another. The medications are unlike the classic case of infectious disease, where they take a swab or a sputum sample or a urine sample, and then they culture the bug, and then they know the sensitivity of the antibiotic, and that kind of thing. We treat mainly, not true of all the.
So the right should focus on competence, excellence, and merit. Maybe J.D. Vance would be a more competent type of Caesarism, where you've got a strong president who sets the tone. So right now, the American right wants to gamble and trade from the stability of the administrative state for the raw energy of populist disruption. But you can harness the raw energy of populist disruption, and you can reconfigure the administrative state to increase social cohesion, social trust, and competence and merit. Let's do that. Let's open up opportunities, meaning reduce unnecessary maladaptive forms of status closure and credentialism, and you can have the best of both worlds. Let's aim for that. A reconfiguration of the administrative state and a channeling of raw populist energy to create a more meritorious and cohesive society. Right, let's use industrial policy and trade policy and foreign policy to increase the dignity and safety of regular Americans.
Diagnoses, but we treat mainly by symptom. If you're depressed, if that depression happens in the context of PTSD, in the context of drug addiction, in the context of I'm blocking now. Anxiety. We'll use it. So no, it's very, very, I guess, sloppy in a sense. But everyone knows it. I give my profession.
So traditionally, free market conservatism would say if a factory in Ohio is less efficient than one in Guangdong, then the Ohio factory should close. But to me, these abstract principles of economic efficiency are not always the most important factor. Sometimes they are. I want an efficient economy. It's not always the most important factor. You have to consider what's best for Americans, for the dignity and cohesion and safety and quality of life for Americans. And so if that means that we use some tariffs to protect that factory in Ohio and to protect that community in Ohio and to protect jobs, say, for Americans with a 90 and 95 IQ, then there are times when you should go against what is most efficient in the abstract to increase the quality of life for your average American. Right? Maybe the social stability of the community is sometimes more important than the cost of a toaster. Not always. Don't say trash models of economic efficiency. I like Trump's pro-AI stance, right? That's its most futuristic move towards status opening. So until now, status has been hoarded by the gatekeepers, by the lawyers, the middle managers, the HR class, the consultants who use their degrees and their credentials to control access to status and wealth. Right? Let's increasingly bypass these gatekeepers when that's not in the public interest. Let's allow people who don't even have a high school diploma to perform tasks where the merit of what they do, right, results in a $200,000 a year salary because they are producing work of greater merit than someone with, say, the credential and the elite degree and 30 years of experience, but who is just phoning it in. Right? Maybe parts of the administrative state that look down on your regular American, maybe we need to dismantle that. Maybe creating more merit-based opportunity and ending illegal DEI mandates and tell Americans, regardless of your race, your success depends on your hard work, not on government carve-outs. Though, if government carve-outs are in the public interest at times, then sure, let's use them. Right? If all these pharmaceutical ads on TV are in the public interest, right? All these ads for PrEP and HIV medications, if that's in the public interest, then don't touch them. But maybe all that pharmaceutical assault in the public airways, maybe it's not in the public interest.
Credit for knowing
being honest about it, yeah.
Yeah,
so,
and trying to fix it.
But so does that, I mean, having said that, your daily sort of purpose and meaning can go in either direction. On the one hand, it could validate that, I'm speaking as you as a psychiatrist, I am dealing with the most complicated organ or machine known in the universe. And so it is expected that I have a much harder job because I'm not an orthopedic surgeon who just has to fix the ruptured Achilles tendon. On the other hand, the orthopedic surgeon walks into that intervention, the tendon is fixed, they walk away feeling like they helped. Whereas you could be intervening with someone for 3 years, never fully knowing how well spent that time was. So where do you fall on this? Are you walking? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think you do have a sense of where you've fallen. You don't have a good sense of certainly what the pathophysiology is. For heaven's sakes, there are over 100 genes involved with schizophrenia. And even then, so many of these conditions have enormous relation to the context in which the person.
So my favorite model for politics, academic model that I discovered in the last few months is by evolutionary psychologist David Pinsoff, and it's the alliance theory of politics, that we push a politics that allows our group to seize the coercive powers of government, and we do that by making alliances, and we shift the things that we say, we shift our rhetoric and our arguments to further our goal of gaining the coercive levers of power. And so much of debate and rhetoric about politics is just a tool to manage our alliances, right? We don't usually use arguments to find the truth unless we're engaging in the status play of, I'm a truth seeker. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm engaging in the status play of trying to use truth. But normally when we argue about politics, we want to signal which side we're on, and we want to inflict social damage on our enemies. And you see this really in right-wing talk radio and the rise of Rush Limbaugh. He provided all sorts of ways to make his side of the political spectrum feel good and damage and malign and ridicule the Dems. And that's how political rhetoric usually works, right? We make our side feel good and we hurt our enemies.
Person lives. So that's what you often work on. You try to get the medication as well honed as you can, minimize side effects because you want the patient to take it. But then so much of the effort really is on the environment the person is living in. And, trying to get a sense of what kind of life they want given the limitations, and helping them socialize. So you can tell if someone has a happier life, a better life, a more content life. And that's we have a different measurement. Now we could certainly measure symptoms, of course, or, how are your hallucinations. This is always found interesting to me when people were, started on, let's say they have a very dense hallucination that they're like Jesus Christ. And we'd have people in the VA fight over it. Well, no, I'm Jesus, but that's where I did my more.
Remember Blake Neff getting fired for participating in some edgy online posting? He was Tucker Carlson's primary writer. Well, Blake Neff is back. He's now the producer of the Charlie Kirk Show. And here he is interviewed by Emily Jashinsky.
It was just, everything was full of possibilities. It was full of fun. I was still like 25, and so it's not jaded by developments.
Oh, okay, Blake Jaded Neff. That's now his middle name.
They call me Black Pill Blake at the office sometimes.
That is such a good name. I'm like kicking myself for not having thought of that before. Black Pill Blake, I want to talk to you about Minneapolis, because speaking of black pills, the scene in Minneapolis just keeps getting, I mean, it feels like it keeps getting more and more unsettled. It wasn't the night of the shooting that things really started to fall apart. Now it almost feels like a build, like something is slowly building in Minneapolis once again. I want to roll this clip from CNN over the week.
So if you loved Tucker's monologues when Tucker was riding high at Fox News, until Blake got fired in, 2020, his monologues, according to Blake anyway, were largely written by Blake. Tucker says they were largely written by him.
Weekend where people can hear the CNN reporter reacting to the lack of police presence. Let's roll this clip.
So, Laura, right now we are in downtown Minneapolis. We've been following this protest outside of a hotel where these protesters believe federal agents may be staying. And just in the last few seconds, it appears they're trying to get actually inside this hotel. While there was law enforcement in this area a little bit earlier in the evening, we have not seen any in the last 30 minutes or so to this point, as they are now clearly, it seems to have breached at least one of the doors here, but at the very least, everyone out in the street making as much noise truly as humanly possible.
Okay,
you're burying the lead there. You're burying the lead there, Emily.
What's the lead? Hit us with the lead.
That's Omar. That's the Kenosha guy, the fiery but mostly peaceful protest with the blaze in the background. It's the same guy. Now
this is why Blake is incredible. His recall. So this is Omar Jimenez, who is the fiery but mostly peaceful man from Kenosha, Wisconsin, and there he's. I mean, maybe you're surprised, Blake. I don't know. Is this the new CNN? He's like, hey, where are the cops?
Yeah, no, I think they send their guys to these scenes, but no, you're right. I think there's an interesting dimension. America is a very big country. There's 350 million people in it. But there's a real power even today for one state or one city to become this focal point of national politics. It symbolizes a lot of things. And Minneapolis really has taken on that role, I would say, probably for this entire decade since George Floyd, of course. It's got that kind of perfect collision of the impacts of immigration, the decline of the blue state model of government. They have a big concentration of that certain type of, let's just call it like white progressivism. The stuff you see in Portland, you also see it in Minneapolis here. And it's going to cause it to constantly be generating these stories that we've gotten used to seeing with the Somali fraud, with defund the police, with depolicing neighborhoods, so on and so forth. And I think you are right that we're going to fix it. And it does feel like it is building towards something. You'd see similar stuff in Portland, a city much like Minneapolis, where they were besieging that federal courthouse for months on end in 2020. And eventually it turned into actual shootings of people in MAGA. And you had DHS personnel arresting people. That was one of the original cases where they were claiming guys in black vans were grabbing people. I do worry, you're right, that we're building towards something. I will say, though, I don't think it's going to be like 2020. There's a clear difference between the ICE stuff and BLM. And the answer is it's not BLM. So you're much more, what I would watch out for is I'm much more worried that someone is going to be radicalized into, I'll just say it, trying to do a shooting on ICE officers or trying to burn down a building.
That happened in Dallas. We've totally forgotten that happened in Dallas, 2 months ago?
Exactly. You could see a much more extreme.
And in the summer of 2016, there was a BLM activist who went and shot and killed 5 police officers in Dallas. And that's when Steve Saylor said to himself, maybe Donald Trump will become elected president.
Version. You could see repeated cases of that or a more extreme version of that. That is what they're whipping people up towards. And that's the kind of person getting radicalized by this. It's not the decentralized 10,000 people take over a neighborhood and they torch a Target and they loot a Foot Locker. It's much more ideologically radicalized people who are open to much more violent action. The kind of people who in 2020 who burned down that police station, you might remember. That was not part of the looting.
So I noticed that the media condemns Donald Trump for not taking decisive action on Iran, that he hasn't lived up to his words, and that somehow it's Donald Trump's fault that he's encouraged protesters to go out into the streets. Now thousands are dead. If Donald Trump encouraged me to do something that was very much against my own interests, I wouldn't go do it, right? It's not Donald Trump who's responsible for the appalling death rate in Iran. And I think it's good that Trump is careful about bombing a foreign country, particularly one that is as challenging as Iran. So I'm glad he's cautious. And this is Megyn Kelly.
Trust on his Iran reporting. He's posting the following. Once again, I'm making no predictions, but so many of you need to be reminded that the Islamic Republic of Iran is not like the Hussein regime in Iraq, the Gaddafi regime, or the Assad regime in Syria. It is not based on hereditary succession, nor is it based on one man or even several men. The Islamic Republic, which controls huge chunks of the Iranian economy, is a vast enterprise involving many people who have a vested interest in remaining in power. While the supreme leader enjoys absolute power, authority is exercised through an entrenched system that was deliberately designed after the 1979 deposing of the Shah to survive leadership changes and internal crises. I keep seeing people saying, take the Ayatollah out, or suggesting doing to Ayatollah Khamenei what was done to Maduro. Khamenei is 86 years old. There are many, many, many men who are well protected and who hold enormous power standing behind him. This is a deeply institutionalized and resilient system of power. Again, I make no predictions, but many of your favorite commentators keep framing this as being about one man, and that simply is not true. In one follow-up post he made, the current governing doctrine of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Velayat-e-Faqih, forgive the pronunciation, I'm sure it's wrong, which means guardianship of the Islamic jurist, is in its final years. I have little doubt about that. That said, I strongly suspect, and some other Iran watchers do as well, that what follows will likely be a system more closely resembling Pakistan's model, a state in which formal civilian institutions exist, but real power is concentrated in a powerful military intelligence deep state, a true deep state, not what people imagine here, rooted in the security services, intel apparatus, and economic networks that operate largely outside public accountability. He says all of that would mean that coercive power would remain firmly entrenched within the state's military and intel institutions, preserving authoritarian control through different means. Again, underscoring that he's not making firm predictions. He says anyone who does, by the way, has no idea what they're talking about. That does a great job of explaining, like, you know, back when I was a kid in the 70s, Emily, they used to show this program, which you've probably heard of, called Deal or No Deal. And the guy would come out and there'd be 3 doors and you'd get a big prize. He'd give you something to bargain with that you didn't have when you showed up. And then he'd show you, like, you have door 1, 2, and 3. And maybe he'd open one door and it would be like a new bedroom set. And you could keep the bedroom set plus the little prize you had in your pocket. Or you could go for what was behind door number 2 or door number 3. And sometimes it would be just a complete boob. And other times it would be a new car. And it would be totally sick. And what I'm gleaning is
Ricardo's back. He says, get Elliot on. Well, it might not be in Elliot's interest to come on. It's painful for me to admit this, but it's not in everybody's interest to come on the show and share their opinions on what's going on in the world. I enjoyed the good times that we shared in the past. But it's usually a self-destructive act to go public with your opinions on highly uncomfortable and controversial and socially toxic issues. So what's good for the show isn't necessarily good for the individuals participating in the show. Sad, but possibly true.
We have no idea what's behind door number 1, 2, or 3. But so far, like what I'm saying, neither option seems like the Lamborghini.
Right, and the one thing, as Yashar puts it there, that just about everybody who's honest should agree on is that we do not know. We don't know. And anybody who is lacking the humility to admit that, I think you should be treating them with suspicion because they probably have been wrong in the past time and again. The only thing that we can know right now is that the situation is obviously deeply uncertain, and that should be frightening because we've gone into a whole lot of situations in the last 50 years, but even just the last 20 years, pretty confident that we had everything under control, and then everything ends up spiraling exactly out of control. So it's tough because nobody wants to see what happens to the people of Iran. One of the points that Yashar made there is it's not just about one man. It's the same thing in a place like Cuba, or actually in a place like Venezuela. It's not just about Maduro. It's not just about Castro or who's in charge of Cuba right now or who's in charge of Iran right now. It's about the fact that they still have supporters also inside of the country. And even the people who don't support them don't necessarily still support the U.S. either. It's not as though you have people on the streets of Iran saying, turn us into Manhattan. Maybe some of them would love that. Maybe some people would like to get out of Iran and go to Manhattan. But that's not the sentiment that is animating these protests universally. And to act like it is, again, anybody who's doing that should be treated with deep suspicion.
So Scott Adams said a lot of stupid things, but he also had a lot of insights that I didn't hear elsewhere. And I think he was particularly prescient about the rise of Donald Trump and Donald Trump's unique political skill set. So back in 2015, he was one of the sharpest, smartest, most important commentators explaining the rise of Donald Trump. And Scott Adams died over the past week. And I admit that there was a show when I said, I hear more interesting ideas from Scott Adams than anyone else. And then as I listened to more Scott Adams, I was like embarrassed that I'd ever said that. So Adams, like all of us, right? Strengths and weaknesses.
Supreme Court all morning and did not know that Scott died. He had just said the other day, he had just said on his show that when you deteriorate markedly from month to month, you should have months left to live. That when it happens week to week, you should have weeks. And when it happens day to day, you probably have just days.
Yeah.
And a couple days later, he died. He said he thought he had months. He said he thought he had months left, so it happened quickly. And his ex-wife, Shelley Miles Adams, went on his feed today and delivered the following message, SOT 71.
Everyone, unfortunately, this isn't good news. Of course, he waited till just before the show started, but he's not with us right anymore. He has a final message that he wanted to say. Many of my Christian friends have asked me to find Jesus before I go. I'm not a believer, but I have to admit the risk-reward calculation for doing so looks so attractive to me. So here I go. I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior and look forward to spending an eternity with him.
So Scott Adams paid a huge price for simply explaining the rise of Donald Trump, and he lost his cachet with a particular elite status set, and to try to escape or reduce that price, he went out for a while and he endorsed Hillary Clinton, and then when he realized that status closure was going to keep him out of the cool kid set, he basically threw in largely with MAGA. He was canceled for saying some controversial things about race, but he soldiered on, and let's give him credit for the sharp, important, intelligent, and unique things that he said, and temper that with the realization that he was wrong about a lot of things too.
The part about me not being a believer should be quite quickly resolved if I wake up in heaven.
Wow. What a great line. What a great line. It's classic Scott Adams, offbeat, out of left field, and beautiful. And, it's Pascal's wager. It's got a long tradition. Pascal was a great mathematician who converted to Christianity. And he said, it only makes sense that you're risking eternity. It only makes sense to believe because you don't lose anything by believing, but you could gain.
So no one's been a better friend to this show than Ricardo. Thanks for your super chats today. He wants Elliot on the show, the used book merchant, and Elliot wants us to know that he's not just a used book merchant, he has hidden depths. He's also branching out into selling DVDs like our mentor Dooovid. Claudio says, I don't fear this show anymore. No one's watching. Warms my heart every time Luke streams. Keep the torch lit. That's why I super chat every time I can. I want Luke to know that he's appreciated. I remember that show when I was saying I heard more interesting things per minute listening to Scott Adams than anybody else. Now, it's so much easier to be interesting, I realized later. So much easier to be interesting. like Neil Ferguson is interesting when you don't feel constrained by what is true. When you don't optimize for truth, it is so much easier to be interesting.
Eternity, and it's worth the wager. And so that was what Scott was saying. You know, he was it's funny. I used to listen to Scott all the time, and I had him on my show very early on when he started talking about political things, and just really liked him. If you had asked me, do I agree with like 50% of what he said, I probably would have said no, but who cares? You know, I mean, he was a creative, original guy, full of goodwill, almost always gracious, which I really appreciate in this atmosphere. I mean, he was always gracious to the people.
So let's have a look at the chat. America needs to get out of other people's yards. That's what war is. That's why I wish we wouldn't get involved in the Middle East illegally without congressional approval. It's too late now. So sometimes intervention serves the public interest, and sometimes it doesn't. And it's not clear whether Trump's interventions are serving American interests. But I think what is clear is significantly superior to George W. Bush, who invaded Iraq and Afghanistan and then kept us there, occupying those places for too many years. So Trump is not fond of putting troops on the ground, and I think that's a good thing. He's not interested in invading and occupying other countries, right? He may knock over this or that, but that's certainly far superior to boots on the ground, Americans getting shot and killed.
Well, I think the problem for us in analyzing this as Americans is we have freedom in our blood. We really do. I mean, it's in our DNA. And so we're like, fuck yeah, let's do it. They want to be free, and we want to help them. We're the United States of America. Fucking A. Sorry. But I think that that's how most of us feel in our hearts. And, you know, Glenn, our mutual friend, Glenn Greenwald, was making the point because, you know, he's very, very skeptical of all of these foreign interventions. And he was making the point that, you know, he was a little sharper on it. But basically, if you believe that the reason we're intervening in places like Venezuela or Iran is because our government is just pro-democracy and just really wants to help these people who want democracy in Iran, he's got a bridge to sell you. You know, it's about, for example, the oil in a place like Venezuela and possibly in Iran too, or about backing a strong ally, Israel, in some places in the Middle East. So, you know, his urging is to always consider the alternate agenda that the government is not laying on the line with us while it tries to like tap our serotonin by wrapping itself in the flag and being like, America, our military, go, because I think we're all very susceptible to that. You know, it's only now, truly, as I've said after the Venezuela thing in my career, that I've finally been through enough of these that I'm like, let's slow our roll. I don't want that serotonin receptor tapped. I want to analyze this much more soberly, taking into account what the risks are, the way I'm sure President Trump is doing.
Yeah, this is why we keep our commie friends like Glenn around. Sometimes we have to take him seriously.
But you also have to listen to Mark Thiessen of AEI, who I love and adore and made a star on Fox News, who's on totally the other side.
Yeah, and I think there are some people who are frustrated that others are listening to both. Like maybe that people like you and I are listening to both and taking this seriously. And I think part of the reason is that there's less control. Like the gatekeepers obviously have so much less control. You were talking about Fox News last week, and it is sort of remarkable to now have the contrast between new media and old media as it's happening, because you just get the split screen. And the good news about new independent media is that there is this kind of cacophony of different opinions and people who, you know, if you respect your audience, you know, they're smart enough. They're just as smart, if not smarter than most of us. They can make up their minds about what's happening on their own if you present all of the different viewpoints fairly.
All right, my friends have highlighted some hilarious posts on X. So you have these unelected officials in the European Union screaming, Greenland is for the Greenlanders, but if you say Germany is for the Germans, in Germany you go to jail. So how can Greenland be for the Greenlanders, but Germany not be for the Germans? So What began as a casual lunch between 5 Twin Cities software engineers escalated into a frightening encounter after the men were misidentified as undercover federal agents. Oi. These activists took white man bad a little too seriously. Asylum seeker from Las Vegas living in UK hotels receiving state support for over a year despite having his asylum claim rejected.
This is a totally bonkers story. It really, really is. A United States asylum seeker has been living in Britain with free accommodation and benefits for more than a year in the first of its kind case. The man is from Las Vegas and he fled to the UK claiming he was being persecuted because he's black, Jewish and a member of the Mormon Church. He was put up in a migrant hotel before his claim was rejected last summer. However, he has not been removed from the UK and subsequently was allowed to claim thousands of pounds in accommodation, food and state support. This is nuts. This is totally nuts. Enjoy.
All right, so GB News is the populist right-wing outlet in Great Britain. Weight loss drugs such as Ozempic are on track. Save U.S. airlines more than $500 million in fuel costs this year. There are now 0 Republican professors at Yale. You can tell a government is fundamentally unserious when their interim president shows up to grovel in a neon green pantsuit and running shoes. It refers to Delcy Rodriguez. And from LinkedIn, United States is the world's superpower. Wants to take over Greenland with the world's strongest army, the most powerful bombs, the biggest bully. But they are up against the most dangerous weapon from the toolbox of the Danes, the working group. Anyone who has sat in a working group as a public employee knows that here you can work process-oriented with innovative action plans. You can facilitate the implementation of holistic solution models with lots of synergy effects and ensure that nothing happens. America does not stand a chance. A gambling consultant tells The Economist by the time a customer places his first bet, the sports books are 80 to 90% certain they know the lifetime value of the count. Sports books mathematically monitor players, create a new risk score every 6 to 8 hours, right? An estimate of probability that the customer will wind up unprofitable. It's wild how unsophisticated and lazy banks are at understanding their customers compared to other industries. So online gambling operations, if you're any good at gambling, they won't allow you to gamble. They want to get rid of you. Right? It's really only the losers that they allow to keep betting. What have I got here?
General psychiatry. But as the medication will start to work, the delusion becomes weaker. So first it's, I am Jesus Christ. I think I'm Jesus Christ. I used to think I was Jesus Christ.
It's not that hard to get clarity on mental health. Just think of the analogy to physical health. If my wrist can do everything that it's supposed to do, my wrist is healthy. My psyche is doing what it should do if it is giving me prompts that align with my self-preservation and self-interest, then my psyche is healthy.
My gosh, that's deranged, you know. And so, you know, these medications can help very much, again, with these hard symptoms. But then people who've had these conditions, especially if they've been untreated for a while, as you can imagine, they have they don't have a work history, and they don't even know, they've never even been in a workplace. And luckily there are sheltered workshops for this kind of stuff. But the point is, a lot of it really is more psychological and social after a while. And I work, my job right now is.
So is America well served by having various groups classified as so vulnerable that they get a no-fly zone for criticism? Right? I think accurate criticism is good for everyone. That our individual, group, national, global interests are compromised when we don't allow for the free flow of information and critique. And Jews have certain gifts, and African Americans have certain gifts, and people from West Africa tend to have certain gifts, and East Africa, right? So we should be able to freely say that different groups have different gifts, right? Jews, Ashkenazi Jews in particular, tend to have high verbal IQs. They are well suited for many parts of modern life, but Jews, like non-Jews, often have excesses. So Jews and non-Jews both receive benefit from accurate critiques. Now, right now, there's a profound social and professional taboo against outsiders critiquing the cultural and behavioral patterns of, say, Black Americans, indigenous groups, gays, other ethnic minorities such as Jews. So often Jews will critique and analyze Gentile society, but it's usually considered really bad form for Gentiles to critique Jews. So only insiders are permitted to offer tough love or structural critiques of their own community. And Jews occupy an interesting space in this no-fly zone because of the Holocaust and other persecution of Jews, right? Any outsider analysis of Jews is usually regarded as anti-Semitic or a precursor to anti-Semitism. So you have a group that is highly influential, highly successful, and protected from outside criticism, right? Accurate criticism makes Jews and non-Jews better. Gays have been persecuted, and they are largely exempt from any group criticism. Muslims in America, largely exempt from any group criticisms. It's considered very bad form to criticize any of these protected groups. To favor a woke perspective means that you regard certain groups, such as Jews, blacks, gays, as occupying a privileged status where, due to their marginalized position, they should be exempt from any group criticism. And I think Steve Saylor is a pretty fair-minded outsider who has interesting perspectives on Jews. And he notes that someone as hard-headed as Alan Greenspan bought into the Ayn Rand cult from his late 20s into his 40s. It is striking. So it's not unusual that many Jews, many gays, many blacks have a persecution complex, right? And they all have historically valid reasons. But when you invoke this persecution and suffering and marginalized status to try to shut down any outside criticism of your group, it strikes many people as obviously unfair, right? Is it really good for Jews, for blacks, for gays to be exempt from any objective analysis by academics and journalists, right? Is perceiving your group as above criticism, right? Is that a really good way to incentivize pro-social performance? So you have Jewish scholars writing a book in 1995, Jews in the New American Scene, saying Jews make up 50% of the top 200 intellectuals in America, 40% of American Nobel Prize winners. But are non-Jews socially encouraged or allowed to objectively discuss the psychological and social patterns that help explain the disproportionate success of Jews? And do Jews have any negative tendencies? And this is what Steve Saylor writes about. He says, off the top of my head, that there are some self-debilitating tendencies among some Jewish intellectuals, such as utopianism, right? We need to bomb Iraq into an America-loving democracy. Now, overall, Jews were much more negative about invading and occupying Iraq than non-Jews in America, but there were Jewish groups who promoted the Iraq invasion because they saw it as good for the Jewish state of Israel. There is a trend among some Jews of worshiping the scholar, the sage, the rabbi, cult worship of the particular speaker, the Karl Marx, the Freud, the Ayn Rand, the Leo Strauss. Right? There's following the sage tendency among many Jewish intellectuals. A lot of ethnocentric nostalgia that you see on display in the immigration debate, where worshiping immigration is substituted for facts and logic. There's a be like me tendency among some Jewish pundits that other groups, such as Mexicans and African immigrants and Muslims, they'll just need to act like Jewish immigrants and everything will turn out fine. That any group can achieve Jewish levels of success. There is a tendency among some Jewish intellectuals for overly complicated plans and analysis with way too many parts to work reliably, such as the neocon plans for fixing the Middle East through invasion. Enlightened self-interest is a great idea, but when you ask, is it good for the Jews, you should recognize that other groups should likely ask similar questions to their own group, and often different groups have different gifts. And some Jewish intellectuals have a tendency that on any topic related to Jews, they must think baroquely many steps down the line. So, for example, talking about IQ might be bad because once you mention that Jews have higher average IQs, this is going to lead to a pogrom. There is a tendency by elites to want to restrict speech. This is a tendency by Jewish elites, non-Jewish elites. Overall, regular Americans like free speech, but elites want to restrict speech because it creates too much chaos. Jews, understandably, often feel quite uncomfortable with analysis of Jews and discussions of Jewish success and influence. So amongst Jews, right, there are all sorts of things that you feel comfortable discussing that you would feel insecure if outsiders start talking about. Past obsession with enemies can blind you to the reality of what's going on right now. Thinking about, oh, this is really good for the Jewish state, and then pushing American policy in that direction without asking, is this good for America, is a dangerous tendency of some Jewish activists. Now, Jews in internal discussions and in writing for fellow Jews, they often love to discuss Jewish success and Jewish influence. But if a non-Jew was to do the same thing, it would make many Jews nervous. I think that's a fair critique there by Saylor. Whoops, I clicked the wrong button. Right, here is Sally Satel.
On your own time, but that we dilute our expertise and I think kind of co-opt the moral authority that physicians have when we try to get involved with these larger social issues. We should do what we're good at. And to the extent that now we have information about, stick with that example about roaches and asthma, that becomes part of the sort of the medical attention, if you know what I mean. But we inform city and municipal housing projects that they really have to be better at exterminating these roaches, not only because, for heaven's sakes, quality of life, no matter who you are, but also it has health consequences. So that's totally legitimate. I consider that very proximate to health. It makes a difference immediately.
So the normal human tendency is to prefer that which feels good to that which is true. And narratives gain power by meeting people's emotional needs, and most people don't have a strong emotional need for truth. So I asked Gemini, what are the most exciting but mostly bogus narratives in America today? So one is that you can see the Great Wall of China from space, that our footprints on Earth are permanent and monumental. Not true. There's the concept of the alpha male in wolf packs, which you find throughout a lot of self-help literature. But wolf packs are usually family units, and the leaders are simply the parents. And there's a great story of a father wolf sitting back watching a mother wolf fight to near death to try to protect the cubs. And you often see that in humans, where the father is much less involved and much less concerned about the offspring than the mother. There is the myth that we only use 10% of our brains. Not true. The bystander effect and Kitty Genovese. Right, the story was heavily distorted by the press. Most neighbors did not realize what was happening. Some did try to help. So this narrative of the cold, unfeeling city was not so true. The Middle Ages is a dark age. The blood is blue inside the body. If we just treat people as we would wish to be treated, the world will respond in kind. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and the 5 stages of grief. Grief doesn't really work that way. What about the top 10 dubious narratives pushed by influencers? You need to go on a dopamine detox. Right? It can help, but you're not detoxing. You're just practicing a particular discipline. That a carnivore diet is the human default. That is what will lead to peak vitality. Right? A purely meat diet is probably not a great idea. Cold plunges are some kind of metabolic miracle. No. Seed oils are a great threat. No. You need to optimize every second of your life. Not really. Blue light is a big sleep killer. We have a masculinity crisis because we got dropping testosterone levels. Microdosing is a productivity cheat code. Everybody should get up at 5 a.m. Gut health, that's where it's at. Here are 10 wisdom claims that are popular but dodgy. Stoicism, that's a great life hack. Right? The idea that if you just adopt a new philosophy, you're going to have a sea change in a positive direction in your life. Doesn't usually work that way. Follow your passion. Not universally great advice. A better type of advice for most people who feel they have artistic strengths is real artists have day jobs. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Not usually. You can't love someone until you love yourself. Everything happens for a reason. Live every day like it's your last. The truth will set you free. Trust your gut. Hard work always pays off. Not so much. Here are the top 10 most dubious claims from the field of academic psychology. The Stanford prison experiment, where people will be cruel if they just get power over others. Right, it's less a study on human nature, more a piece of theater. The power pose, right? It's not going to change your hormone levels. Willpower is a finite resource. If you spend all day resisting cookies at work, you won't have the willpower to go to the gym at night. Apparently, this doesn't replicate. There's no consistent effect from ego depletion. Willpower comes from your beliefs, your motivation, and your environment more than a chemical fuel that runs out. The implicit association test, pushed by corporate diversity training to measure hidden biases, doesn't replicate. You need to adapt a growth mindset. Not much evidence that helps. Priming, right? You're given a word search containing words related to the elderly, then you'll start feeling old. Priming doesn't replicate. That we all have different learning styles. Some people are visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Doesn't replicate. If you can just delay gratification with the marshmallow test, that's going to predict your future. Your level of self-control is your destiny. Doesn't replicate. Smiling makes you happy. Doesn't replicate. Left brain versus right brain personality. Doesn't replicate. What about the most bogus, top 10 bogus elite mainstream media narratives? The Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation. COVID lab leak theory was a conspiracy. That border agents on horseback were whipping migrants, Haitian immigrants. That Florida Parental Rights and Education Act was the Don't Say Gay bill. The mockery of the Covington Catholic school kids. The smoking gun of the Russia-Trump collusion. The Jussie Smollett hate crime. That inflation in 2021 was just transitory. The Duke lacrosse rape case, where the Duke lacrosse players were completely innocent. And that hospitals were getting overloaded by the unvaccinated getting sick.
But these far-flung topics are less relevant for us. And the one that's now taken center stage is, quote unquote, dismantling racism and anti-racism efforts, and, defined in a way that I think we all would agree on, that it's overt discrimination and or quote unquote systemic discrimination is a problem. But there is so much doctors can do, and their job is not to be activists. And this new trend in medicine is very, very, it's not quite pervasive, at least in medical training, is that doctors need to have coursework in anti-racism and in implicit bias training. Mm-hmm. And that literature, and everyone I know who's reviewed that literature carefully, shows that there is, in terms of the implicit association test, you may have heard of this, is supposedly a measure of implicit unconscious bias that's outside of your awareness. It doesn't translate into how people interact with people. So it's basically, frankly, a waste of time. We have so many important things to do with patients. We know how to do them. We don't have enough time to do them. That's the big issue.
All right, let's get Dooovid back on the show. So, Dooovid, you just wrote in the chat about Bundle coming on to talk about Myron Gaines at the University of Michigan and that you provided security. What are you talking about there, Dooovid?
Uncensored America. I'm not sure if you've even heard of them. Came to university. Have you heard of them?
No.
I mean, I think they're only like 6 months old, but you're doing like Charlie Kirk, setting up tents, going to college campuses with controversial topics. But they're and they have a few people that maybe you have heard of. I think Milo. They did an event with Milo, maybe Destiny or a few others. But now after Charlie Kirk, really the only one that got the balls to do it is the guy Myron Gaines, Fresh and Fit podcast. If you've heard of him, but he came to University of Michigan on Thursday. And so I went out, I went out there to help him, to help and promote the event. Cause like I wanted to see such things. And honestly, I have other reasons why I wanted to, I want to get in with like Andrew Tate, not necessarily, but like I wanted to send a signal to Andrew Tate somehow. And, cause I educate in Detroit and he's a very controversial figure, but I think I wanted to like up my credibility among blacks by showing them that I actually know Andrew Tate somehow. But so I had my own intentions in going there. But it was an interesting event. I'm not sure, there's so much crap going on that it probably didn't even make the circuit. There was like tens of people doing Nazi salutes and like obviously the thousands of, and I don't know if there's the clip of like the Jewish End Hate group that asked the first question. And, but like there was the other dynamic that the topic of this one was ICE did nothing wrong, which you probably agree with. And are you familiar?
Well, that's my prejudice. That's my prejudice. I'm not saying it's true, but yeah, my prejudice is to side with ICE. But keep telling me. I'm playing the video that you gave.
Did you want to play the volume so you could hear it? I'll just be quiet then.
No, just give me your commentary. What was going on there? I see a guy with a yarmulke asking a question.
So that's the very first question, and he's like the student chapter head of End Jew Hate. I've never met him. He's a student, but he asked the first question, and it's basically about Jews or the Holocaust, even though the topic is ICE did nothing wrong. And honestly, I agree. Ironically, there's like 10 people standing there with the Let 'em Cook hats, like winter hats and sweatshirts. Are you familiar with those?
No. So who are these guys?
You're not familiar at all with like Myron Gaines and the Fresh and Fit podcast. They're black, so you probably don't keep up with them, but they've been the mainstream voice into the public for the far right by teaming up with like Nick Fuentes. And so it's basically like based cool black people hanging out with the white supremacists. Not who I'd call, but like alt-right figures. And it's been a big thing. So like their podcast, which is based like manosphere, self-improvement, fitness, make money, but then also, hosting like banned people. And they've taken up a few topics because they're anti-Israel. And, so they came out with new clothing, based on like the Nick Fuentes, God forbid, like the Let 'em Cook that has like a Cookie Monster. And it's a signal to some sort of anti-Semitism. So, you're not keeping up with this at all. God forbid you're an old man whose memory is failing you. You haven't kept up with.
Yeah, now that you talk about it, I've heard about it, but I certainly haven't kept up with it. So what's your experience with this crew?
None. Zero.
None.
It's new and it's the biggest thing. And so I went, and I went to, I was kind of like, I would, become like an alumni because I'm alumni of U of M, just like your dad, right?
Oh, my dad went to Michigan State.
Michigan State? Okay. But or Brundles. The Michigan's, I'm proud alumni, and I wanted to help the uncensored America, and say like, I support this. I would even donate money. I told them I volunteered. Like I stood out in literally 10-degree weather for 10 hours. I only went inside 2 times for less than 10 minutes to warm my feet and, get a bagel. So I was just volunteering 10 hours, but so it wasn't just related to Myron Gaines. I was just like, I like this, And like, honestly, like, I'd like to do that. I'd like to be like the guest doing the Uncensored America, but like relatively, I just said, I'd help and bring whoever the hell they want, liberal or whatever. But like, they had Myron Gaines there, and, I never met him. And in fact, when he first walked in, like he was doing the Roman salutes, and like, I was wearing like a yellow construction jacket, and I mean, I knew people that like the Uncensored America guys, they probably didn't like me or want me there. I don't know exactly what their deal is. I'm not sure if they're like Manosphere, Andrew Tate guys, or if they're more alt-right, because like, these are more, I'm not really sure their politics, but I'm saying like it's, and I still don't know, so I mean, he basically walked in and took questions, and I got to do security. I was just like, back up. And I told them like he's the one who needs security. Like, and so like the first question, the guy's asking like, what's your message to the 6,000 Jewish students on campus that are scared that you're here? And like, I honestly like his answer, I was like 100%. I don't know if you would agree, but he was like, don't be a bitch. There's 6,000 of you. What are you scared of me for? And I was like 100%. Like, if there's 6,000 Jews on campus, you're scared of one black guy? It just made him sound like bitches. And I think, basically like, but it was, I think the back and forth, there really wasn't much, the ICE thing, everyone wanted to argue with him about ICE. And he was just like, he's a former ICE officer. He's done raids. I think he was even sponsored by ICE. Like, I think like he probably even met on University of Michigan with ICE. And I was telling my mom, like when I was trying for jobs after school, like FBI, CIA, Homeland Security, police, ICE, they all recruit at like University of Michigan. But like, if you're in the bottom 25% of your class, you work for Homeland Security or ICE, or if you're a minority. So I mean, thinking like he's, a Sudanese immigrant, probably pretty smart, gets a degree and works for ICE. But like, I personally, and like Andrew Tate, like he went back to Florida, and Andrew Tate was back in America. So, I mean, personally, I think Andrew Tate has more staying power in MAGA than Ben Shapiro. In fact, I told the Jewish student, the guy right before he spoke, I was like, you're MAGA, he's MAGA. Ben Shapiro's MAGA, Myron Gaines is MAGA. And I've said, like, Andrew Tate got more people to vote for Trump than Ben Shapiro did. I mean, but that was my take on it. And I was being, like, interactive and confrontational to get more, debates and activity. They're going to release the video. There's, like, a full 3 hours. It was crazy. There was, like, trannies. And, like, I didn't know about myself, but, like, I don't know about you, but it's been, I just have a deep disgust and like hatred of trannies. And I think like I wasn't expecting it, but like everyone, and like but like I think I was the most homophobic person there, even than the other people. And but that was like an interesting issue, because it's like University of Michigan, and like I'm a Haredi Jew, and I was even like I would just like fuck it. Like honestly, I thought like I might end up getting in a fight to the death with somebody, and I was just like, fuck it, I'm tired of this shit. Like, I know, like, nobody likes me. Jews don't like me. Zionists don't like me. Anti-Zionists don't like me. Goyim don't like me. So I was just like, fuck it. I'll go there. And, like, I mean, in my head, I was just like, fuck it. Like, I was ready to get in a fight with, like, anybody, Jew, Gentile. And, I mean, I like, in my head, like, there was nothing happening. Like, like, I'm a calm person. But, I was relatively, like, and it was cold. Like I said, it was, like, 10 degrees. There weren't that many people out there. And it was relatively, like, the only activity was like these trannies, and it was almost ironic because like even the Jews, they were kind of like well behaved and asked questions and argued, or and then there was like just a few trannies there that were really going wild. And I mean it was but I enjoyed the event. I think it'll be more. And then I saw like, I'm not sure, like, I mean, Myron Gaines is way bigger than Richard Spencer ever was. Like later that day they released his interview with Candace Owens. And then later that night, he was in Miami with Andrew Tate and his brother and Sneeko. And, so it's ironic that, if you, the anti-Semitism is now went to the left or to the MAGA multicultural right. And so you probably aren't really familiar with any of these people. And, but that's where the fame is. And like these guys are the guys you want to be like relatively, because these guys, like they have sex with women all the time. Like, so they're traveling counter Semites, they're black, most of them are fighters, So like, they don't need security. They do their own security. They want to show that they could kick your ass, and they get to bang bitches, and they're doing the Nazi salute. It was kind of crazy. I mean, you're just retired. You don't even have a take on it. And I was just like, I was just kind of like happy to see it, because I was like, at this point, like I'm just sitting in my apartment reading books, and like no one likes me. And I was just like, let's just have the shit hit the fan already.
So many thoughts. It's not that I didn't have thoughts when you were talking. I just was listening to you and thinking so many things came up for me. But one thing that came up,
I would do that for Richard Spencer also, like for what I did for Myron Gaines, and like I could tell you more, because like I knew people, like I spoke to people know me, my dad, I knew names of professors, like I'm alumni, but I mean, just I would do the same thing for Richard Spencer if he wanted to.
So one thing that came to mind is that if you don't have children, particularly if you're a man, you need to find excitement in your life. If you have children, usually people with children find all the excitement they need from their children. But you and I, we don't have kids, and so therefore we are excitement seekers. You think that's fair?
I mean, somewhat, but like, no, I mean, this was University of Michigan, like, these were nerds. Like, Michigan's not a party school. The recent sex surveys, like 50% of students there are celibate. So, I mean, like, it wasn't like if he went, I might have went if it was a more lively place, but I'm saying like, no, I mean, this was still University of Michigan, a campus of mostly nerds.
But
that's still, it's excitement for me. Like, that's excitement for me.
Yeah. Yeah, but we both seek excitement. It drives
me.
Yeah, I mean,
and also I just wanted to be around some young girls too. Like, honestly, like, yeah, I mean, like still, like, maybe it's possible, and saying like, there's no better place to meet the kind of girl I would want to marry than University of Michigan.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, especially there's 5,000 Jews there. I'm saying like, yeah, I mean, that was going through my mind. Like, maybe there's some like, God forbid, like, I'm an old bachelor. There's, 2,000 probably, pretty high quality Jewish girls there. So like, yeah, that was 100% going through the back of my mind.
So
even you, like, I don't know if I don't know if you've given up like that, but like, even you, like, I'm saying that, like a college campus like that, that's where you could be around thousands of, really like 9 Jewish girls.
Yes. I enjoy the company of attractive young women. But
you also agree the best place to find them is elite college campuses.
Yeah. So let me form my point and my question. I'm a rebel. You're a rebel. We're dissidents. It sounds like the fresh fit guys are dissidents too. Would you also agree with this vulnerable truth that inside the biggest rebels is still a yearning for respectability and to rejoin polite society? So all sorts of people can act out and rebel for a while, but you can never squash that desire to rejoin life in the center of the herd.
Well, you could sublimate from poor man fantasies to rich man fantasies, and that's something I've been using the expression 20 years, even when I was in Hasidic, Borough Park, that there's poor man fantasies and rich man fantasies, and you should eradicate the poor man fantasies. And the poor man fantasies are forbidden sexual relations, violence, but relatively, your average person, they're like, oh, if I were rich and famous, like fresh and fit, I would want to have sex. That was this whole thing, like you have to have sex with 50 women before you get married. And so like and you gotta get big and strong, and and get in fights in the ring, and various things that like I wouldn't agree with at all. I mean, there's marginal utility, and it's like specifically those are poor man fantasies. So like Andrew Tate is the epitome of living out poor man fantasies. But like if you could sublimate that to rich man fantasies, where you recognize like, no, you're never going to get to do that. Like, okay, I didn't get to bang a bunch of girls when I was young, and I just reckon I'm never going to get to do that. I'm not going to try to do that in my old age. But like what you're talking about, like, yeah, you could do that. That's where you pivot to politics, power, and money. And like I saw, like, no, I mean, like I have almost zero common interest of, any of those people. Like, I don't want really fast cars, or I'm pretty celibate. Like, I mean, personally, I think I would probably reject having sex even with a supermodel. I could say like I have physical desire, but that's not what my interest is. I have, maybe more subversives. Like, I'm a Jew. I want to subvert and change society. Those are the rich man fantasies.
But imagine that your social position changed so that you had more and more to lose. So when you were sharing your fantasies, you were being brutally open about how you don't feel like you have much to lose. But the more you have to lose, whether it's money, social status, community, friends, family, then the more careful you will be in your public actions and words, correct?
Yeah, and I mean, socially, I basically have nothing to lose. I mean, I have some status maybe as a volunteer chess coach. I mean, so like the only thing I could lose is like people not wanting me to volunteer being a chess coach. I mean, that's like in essence, social standing. I have, and especially like as a Jew, because like at this point, like I've determined I'm going to die as a Jew, even though I basically failed as a Jew. So puts me in this. I still have. Legal, like I wouldn't do anything that would put me in legal or financial jeopardy. Like I care about my, in that sense, like I'm not dumb. And I think poor man fantasies, even promiscuity would just put me at risk for even a girlfriend to some extent, like, would put me at risk for my health, financial things. So like I'm extremely careful about that, but like social standing, I basically don't have any, but I wouldn't risk it by like doing unbecoming things I mean, in my extent, like I didn't realize, like to me, like that's being a tranny, and like to me, like there's nothing like God. And it was actually the question, one of the, like this comedian asked the question to him is like, would you rather have your daughter be a thought or your son be gay? And I don't know why he answered, but he was like, I'd rather have my son be gay because at least he could beat that out of him. But I'm not really transgressive like that, like a pill eater or something like that. I don't really have transgressive desires. They're more pure. Like I would like social standing, but either I failed in achieving social standings in the available structures, or I did not want to compete or try to rise those, and so I've always been independent, and
Now, there's a classical Jewish approach that you want to be able to learn from everyone. So you want to
100%.
learn from their successes, you want to learn from their failures, you want to learn from their good deeds, you want to learn from their bad deeds. What do you feel like you've learned from, say, this fresh and fit crew?
I think Israel's going to lose, but the Jews are going to win. I could just see that because, like, University of Michigan still has 6,000, but like, it's kind of like this. It's like when we first talk, like people like Jews as like doctors and lawyers and financial, but Nick Fuentes is right, and I think that Trump's going to choose Andrew Tate over Ben Shapiro. Basically, that was my take from it. Like there's minor takes, and I also saw like Jews are scared now. Jewish organizational leaders, I think they realize that. I think I'm right. I'm going to be proven right, in that the rise in anti-Semitism is almost exclusively caused by Israeli policy. But considering like it probably is genocide, there probably are well over hundreds of thousands of people dead, and I think Jews are going to start getting killed. I mean, honestly, that's my honest take on it. I know it's scary. And like I have a dog in this, but like I also think it was mostly our own fault that like Jews are going to start getting killed, and it is our own fault because of this genocide. That's that was my take from going there. There were a bunch of people doing Nazi salutes, and it's really just one black guy. There's 6,000 Jews, and they're a bunch of bitches. In that sense, I think Myron Gaines was right. And I was kind of happy. Like I like the Jews, relatively minus anti-Zionism. I want the Jews to win, but I think he proved his point. He came in, said, "You're a bunch of bitches," did the Nazi salute a bunch of times, and was basically, "What are you going to do about it?" And now he's hanging out with Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes, and Andrew Tate just proven himself by stepping in the ring. Saying that's the difference. That's the honor culture that whites and Jews are missing, where that guy was like, "Fuck it, I'll fight you right now," as where Jews aren't like that, and Israelis are like that. So like whether Israel wins or like that, but I'm saying Israelis are not really tough like that. I mean, compared to like American blacks or like MMA, Andrew Tate, Sneeko, like they're right. Jews aren't really tough like that. Jews would get their ass kicked, and like that's just what it is in terms of like Israel and military strategy, technology, the Air Force. Who knows what's going on with Iran? I mean, I could give some sort of commentary, but I think Trump is going to pull the plug on the Ben Shapiro, Mark, like your side of the right, and I think he's going to start promoting. I think you might see Andrew Tate next to Trump. In fact, you might even start seeing Nazi salutes just as a joke. I mean, and it's kind of just like it's like a test. In Michigan, there was near me there was like the N-word, and there was a fight, and it was somewhat like a defense. Say like, oh, my son got in a fight, but the guy said the N-word, which could even legally be a defense. I mean, even like in school, like, I mean, God forbid, like, it could be the case probably even in California, like, someone just says the N-word and he gets punched, that the guy might not get punished for punching the guy. Be like, well, you said the N-word. But like there is a certain amount of that where Jews are not going to do well in this situation. You're going to see a lot of transgressive people probably doing Nazi salutes, and I mean it's kind of like I mean I don't know if you were like a tough. You weren't a fighter though. You didn't get in a bunch of fights, did you?
Correct. I did not.
Okay, I got in a bunch of, but like like I'm not a violent guy, but like I babysat brats. Like especially as a religious Jew, and you kind of get like this feeling like I wish you would, meaning to say like, like I was an outsider, Bolshuva, and if like I hit a fellow Jew, even if he was the worst ever, like I would have been expelled instantly. No one would even ask like who was at fault, like unless like he threw the first punch first, which basically never happened. But you get that feel where like I wish you would, and honestly, like that's how people feel about Jews. Like you see, like there were tens of people doing the Nazi salute, looking at these Jewish students saying, I wish you would. I'd kick your ass. There's nothing I'd rather do.
Okay,
and,
so hang on.
I mean, that's just I mean, saying you asked what I felt. Like that's what I felt. That's what it is. I don't know if you've been on the street. Hopefully we could change that. But that like unfortunately, like I'm still walking around with a beard and yarmulke, and I'm saying like people could hide being Jewish. But I'm saying like, no, I was looking at people in their eyes, and like, I mean, that was my perception of how people are feeling now.
So I've shared this story before, but I think it applies here. So in August of 1988, I was at UCLA, and there was a professional tennis tournament being played. And if you went to a particular outcrop, so you went to a particular place, you could see half of the tennis match for free, but it was illegal to be there. But there were a bunch of us up there watching half the tennis match for free, and finally the police came and said that we needed to leave, or at least maybe college administrators came and said that we weren't allowed to be there. And in the confrontation, somebody almost slipped and fell off this concrete outcrop, which could have killed them. So everything's fun and games until someone suddenly gets hurt. And so by me being in the middle there, like I played a role in creating a dangerous, potentially deadly situation. You were in a potentially violent situation. I don't know about you. I was raised pretty much safety first and flee from not just violence, but any potential of violence. So how do you judge that approach, that middle class educated approach, that not only should you flee from violence, you should flee from the potential for violence?
Well, okay. I mean, say University of Michigan, there were just a bunch of people that wanted to kill each other, but like I don't think that like there were still police around. There's cameras everywhere, and there were legally there was no guns allowed. I mean, obviously it was cold and people could have had a gun. But University of Michigan, still, it's illegal to have a gun there. So I just meant there was a whole bunch of people that wanted to kill each other. But like, I mean, relatively, it was pretty friendly. There were police with guns and security and cameras everywhere. So that was just more the tension in the room, and nothing actually happened. So like relatively, it's more dangerous. Like probably just me working in Detroit on a regular basis, and so I just try not to disrespect people and careful about people's honor. And relatively, I teach in Detroit. I'm active in Detroit, and that's Rabbi Wolfson. I remember. I was I drove him. I was his driver in Jerusalem for a few weeks, and I drove him to the Kotel. And the night before, someone had got murdered, and the Gabbai had mentioned that to Rabbi Wolfson, and he had said, "Bad things usually only happen to people where they don't belong." And I've lived by those words my whole life since that. And basically, I think that's relative. Like, it's University of Michigan. I'm an alumni. It's an uncensored event. I belong there, whether people don't like me or not. But that would be my recommendation, or how I, do I belong there or not? If I belong there, I'm probably safe. And then if you're in a situation where it's it's dangerous, and I'm in a lot of situations, probably like you, where you're around people that are extremely dangerous, but you could feel safe that they're not going to hurt you as long as you don't disrespect them or dishonor them in some way. So that, my whole life, as a chess player or public schools, I've always been around extremely violent people that have really never harmed me or hurt me because I didn't disrespect or dishonor them. And then occasionally you could see people are just that are not stable, especially when you're in public school or public spaces. There might be people that are just unstable, and even if you don't disrespect them or something, they're still, but this was University of Michigan. There were no unstable people. There's no homeless or crazy people there, or something like in Detroit or LA, where you probably just walk out your door and there's unstable or homeless people. So in that sense, it was just the tension in the room.
Would you like to see a return to the severely mentally ill being housed in mental institutions instead of being on the street and yelling and screaming?
No. I like talking to and caring for crazy people. If there was an opportunity, in fact, I do it regularly. I do public, I was doing public chess events, and where you just set up chessboards in public, and crazy, some disturbed crazy people show up, homeless people. I like helping those people. When I was in Brooklyn, I was a gabbai at Shomer Shabbos. I was always involved in things like helping homeless people and feeding poor people. And just like you said, that a wise man learns from every person. In certain ways, you could actually learn quite a bit from crazy and homeless people. Sometimes you could learn information exclusively available, in terms of police or dirty information or something like I'm not sure if you ever worked at this. We talked about that in the past, where you said in LA, your synagogues have strict security. There's no schnorrers or crazy people there. But that was not my experience in Jerusalem or Brooklyn. Every synagogue had schnorrers and crazy people there, and you just learn to kind of enjoy dealing with them.
And we certainly have crazy people and schnorrers in many LA synagogues, though with more security, there are more standards.
But I'm saying you just tried to get away from them. I enjoyed, I enjoy giving them money. I enjoy that's like Andrew Tate. I enjoy just kind of encouraging people and you can do it, or just maybe I believe in God and Torah a little bit more than you, where I think there's a reciprocal where God treats you like you treat other people, and it's okay, I'm nice to schnorrers, Luke's not, so God's going to reward me a little bit better than you.
So I want public policy and Jewish policy and social policy and charity policy to incentivize good behavior and to punish bad behavior. Do you share that perspective, or you want to change it?
No, I'm a libertarian and God-fearing person. To me, it's a sign of lack of belief in God to be so concerned with other people. Maybe you as a more atheistic Orthodox Jew don't trust God and karma to work things out on themselves. I'm not sure, but me, I have largely faith in God and karma to work things out on themselves, and politics doesn't interest me. Money interests me, social state, the various things, but to me, politics is mostly a trap. And mean, obviously you disagree. You're like, I'm still educated and well-read and keep up with it. And, policy, I don't think policy really matters to the average person. Policy really only matters to rich people.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. I believe the primary reason that I do these live streams and that I write blog posts is to gain status among a tiny group of people who I respect. Do you think that's true? Do you think that's what's driving me, or do you think I'm fooling myself?
I can't picture that. I mean, I would say, I was going to answer differently for myself, and maybe that would be more accurate for you, but saying I have accepted that I will never gain status among those people, so I've sought out an alternative venue of status, as where, maybe you're saying the opposite. Like, you're not trying to gain status from me. You're trying to use me to gain status among the people who are never going to give you status, as opposed to I've just said, okay, I'm never going to win in those circles. Maybe I could make my own circles.
So I loved the shows we did in 2018 when we had a wide variety of people coming on to discuss uncomfortable issues. But it quickly became clear to me that most people who want to participate in a public discussion of uncomfortable topics, they will do so to their detriment. So what are the moral responsibilities, you think, of the streamer and the host? How much do we need to protect our guests against their own destructive impulses?
I mean, okay, if you're bringing someone on, okay, you brought me on, everyone's sitting there, I was the one who, I was relatively knew Myron Gaines better than anyone else there. And the people, how the hell do you know these people? And it's well, through you. So this guy, Luke Ford, who I randomly hopped on his stream, who knew these people. And I wouldn't say you introduced them to me. I mean, it's just streaming. And if you're talking about our relation, personally, but in any scenario, you can't control other people. A wise person knows you can't control other people. But at some point you could control your relation. The only thing you could do is distance them. And if you're saying you have to, are you really concerned about the welfare of the other person or yourself? You're saying, okay, you want to distance yourself from Dooovid because it's not good for your numbers, or it's not the direction you want to take your channel, or because you're really concerned about Dooovid. And that would usually be the case. No, Doovid's really good for my numbers. He's doing great. People love him, but I'm concerned about him. It would usually not be the case. Because you'd have to be doing some, if he wasn't popular, you'd have to be doing. So I'm not exactly sure, but I generally leave people to their own device.
Right. So I don't think I've damaged your life, and I don't think that you're damaging your life by appearing on my show. But for other people, they have damaged their lives because they have too much to lose. They have spouses and kids and respectable jobs. But it's not hurting your life to come on my show anymore, if it ever did.
Well, even then, no, I'm saying I was just the pathetic balchuva that no one liked at the time anyways. You kind of woke me out of that. Unfortunately, I was one of the guys that just didn't realize that Jews didn't really like me that much. And some Jews like me, and I still have Jewish friends, but you're the one who kind of pulled me out of that bubble. I mean, not really you, it was the streaming, because it was the public reaction and the lack of support from my fellow Jews to make me realize that it was kind of all in my head that most Jews don't really like me. At best view me as a fellow Jew. But I don't think that has anything to do, saying no, I mean, relatively, I know famous people because of Luke Ford, and most of them are dissidents. And still at this point, in fact, it's ironic because at this point, I know some of the most famous people in America, and it's exclusively to you. And unfortunately for your level it didn't really help you, because it was these white guy. It's now a different generation. Even Nick Fuentes, who was on your podcast and is one of the most famous people in the world, who I never met. But it is ironic that these are some of the most famous people on the internet, and not even on the internet. These guys are banging hoes. God forbid. Not when it was the anti-Semitism protesting, you're thinking HT is going and protesting at Jewish Institute. No, these guys are going out to parties and banging hoes, and it's saying no, I met them through you. I mean, and I always say that from the beginning, I accept karma. Kind of like a girl or something like that. If you're among very Haredi, the first question is how'd you meet your wife? Because obviously no good Haredi would have they were set up or something. It's like, well, who set you up? And so I always accept that there's some sort of karmic providence to that. So I'm not saying you bear any culpability, but I'm just saying, like, it was you introduced me to famous people, and now those people, God forbid they're anti-Semites, but they're some of the most famous people in the world.
Now, I have very vivid memories of sharp, painful things that people have said to me over the years that have sharp, critical comments that have shifted my life in a new direction. Do you have sharp, vivid memories of some of the most painful comments that people have said to you?
It didn't. I remember Rabbi Bullman at Or Samayach, like, looked at me and like it didn't really shake me, because it, like, to me, he was kind of unhinged, but he looked at me and he's like, "There's something wrong with you. You have no light in your soul," or something like that. Rabbi Nathan Bullman at Or Samayach. I mean, it was kind of shocking that he said that to me. Day trading. I've said this a few times, that my boss, who funded me trading, without getting into all the dynamics, but like eventually, like, when he reached management, he was like, "Oh shit, you are screwing everybody." And he was like, "Well, one day you'll get to do that to other people." And that, I could explain the financial dynamics of what he was saying, but that, that kind of hit me. And, a few things like business wise that almost exclusively I learned from Jews, like Orthodox Jews, so without like hundreds of business lessons, I learned from Orthodox Jews. There's a guy, Shimmy Bertrand, I've mentioned many times, when I first came to Borough Park, and he was kind of like, he liked me. He's like, "You're a cool guy. You'll probably make a lot of friends, but like, you didn't grow up with these guys. You're never going to be part of the crew like that." And blue-eyed, like among Jews, I had people that I learned from Haredi Jews the power of blue eyes, where my fellow Jews with blue eyes were just like, they're not going to cut you in on this. You're not going to be a part of it. It's like, you don't have blue eyes. And like, I didn't, there are certain circles in, Haredi Judaism where basically everybody has light features and blue eyes. And I wasn't aware of that. And, someone was willing to like straight inform me, like, "You don't have blue eyes. They're not going to let you in on this." So like that, I think most people have never seen that or wouldn't believe it as it exists. And I always talk about like the blue-eyed people. So, like that. And then the guy, Moshe Leib Lacks, the guy who, the diamond dealer who you mentioned for, that was with Ivanka Trump and, did business with Trump. And I was his driver. He told me that music is for poor people. That's probably the actual one. That's the only one that really like struck me. When he said music is for poor people, I was like, shit, you're right. Because I love music. My dad loves music. I would always do my time like listening to music. And he was just like, straight up, music's for poor people, son. And like that changed my life. Because I was just like, and that I actually renounced entertainment completely. Like after that, I was like, humor. And so that was like the one line. Like I was driving, at the time, this Hasidic Jew whose dad had over $100 million. He was doing business with Ivanka Trump. And he just looked at me. He's like, "Music's for poor people, son." And it just struck me, because I was like, oh shit, you're right. I'm a nobody. And I wasted my life listening to music. So that was like emotionally probably the biggest one. And then there's also another like charity collector. And this guy was a rabbi, and he collected a lot of money. And he was a tough guy, but I was his driver, and he would raise money, and then he'd get in the car after he was done, and he'd look at me and he's like, "I wanted to hit that guy in the stomach so bad." And like, just to realize that like even rabbis feel like that. And like this guy was this guy was a huge charity collector. He knew hundreds and hundreds of millionaires, but like he would talk to them, and then he'd get back in the car, like I was his driver, and he'd just tell me how he wanted to beat the fuck out of those people. And I was like, yeah, that's probably how those people feel. But like, just that he openly said it. There was another rabbi, like this guy was the son of a famous Hasidic Rebbe. And like he went to like some shiva, and like I was his driver. And then afterwards he was like so upset that he had to go to it. He's like, "Oh man," and he asked the guy for money. And I mean, it was just their culture. But like at the time I was like shocked. Like this guy went to the shiva, And then, like, I guess he expected to get paid for going to the Shiva. And then the whole ride giving him back, he was just like so upset that like he didn't get paid for going to the Shiva. And like at that point, it was just truly shocking. But then later I was just like, oh, that's just how it worked. Like, he's a rabbi, he's got to get paid. And he was pissed he didn't get paid. But like at the time, I was just like completely shocked. And this guy was like, like a famous Rebbe's, son. He was like big and high up. And I didn't even know, like at the time, I was like, I thought these guys were like angels. And just to hear that guy, like these rabbis talking like that, like about beating people up or like, bashing their own followers for not giving them enough money. Like that was life changing in that, because like you wouldn't think it was possible till you actually see it. The sex, like drugs type things like that didn't really shock me, and I stayed away from it. I'm not sure if you had, if whatever I said maybe rang something to you to bring up, but like those things, like life changing, just where I had a complete perceptive switch that I never saw things the same since.
So something that you're touching on.
Also another, like, I'll add one more thing, where I remember I was in Bubba, and there was this newspaper article about like, a slumlord, but like he had tens and tens of millions of dollars. And I was like, I wanted to know, like, who's this rich guy? And then someone pointed out that like, this huge millionaire was the guy who sets up the coffee in the morning. He was just like a little humble guy hunched over, and it was him who woke up early in the morning to make coffee for everybody else. The richest guy in synagogue that, like I'd seen multiple times. I would have never guessed in my life it was him.
Okay, I'm gonna move on, but I want to we have time, so feel free to either bring up another topic, develop on something, or feel free to challenge or ask me anything if you want to. Otherwise, we'll just call it a day.
Well, I appreciate you letting me, like, just, it was a big event with Myron, and, like, it's gone, like, everything else is random. I mean, just you asked that question to me. It was thought-provoking to think about it. If you wanted to share some of those moments, like, I'd be interested to listen, or, I'll let you move on.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about myself then for a minute. And I saw a remark on YouTube comments that here's the remark. Look forward is a genre in and of itself, as if humanity drops the act and tells you exactly what you always hoped was not true. And so then I went to Gemini and said, what does this mean? And so Gemini says that I have a reputation for an almost pathological level of transparency and bluntness, that I don't fit into standard categories such as political commentary or religious blogging, but I have a specific, unfiltered way of viewing the world that focuses on status and social dynamics and the uncomfortable motivations behind human behavior, and that I love to talk about the uncomfortable topics that people usually keep quiet for the sake of being polite and for the sake of cohesion. What do you think about that analysis?
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, that's Myron Gaines is the ICE officer, where probably 2 hours of the 3 hours was specific about the shooting, and he went into details of like, the use of force justification and the various laws, and he knew the codes. I mean, I was actually impressed. Like, he had memorized the numbers and the codes and various things. But yeah, I would think that uncensored, if there could be more of it to talk openly about these things. It's good for people like me or you. And maybe it's moving in that direction. Would hope would be the case. It's been years, or probably cycles. So maybe the low time right now, it's going to pick back up. But I appreciate you staying out there and streaming.
Wait, hang on. I got a further description here. It's a description of me, but I think it also fits you. Radical honesty. He's known for broadcasting his own vulnerabilities, social failures, and internal calculations. By dropping the act himself, he makes his audience feel like they are seeing the raw, unvarnished reality of the human condition, even when that reality is depressing. I think that's a fairly accurate description of my performance, and I think it's a fairly accurate description of your public performance. What do you think?
Yeah, although I think I'm limited in public performance. That, like, I'm okay. In real life, I'm usually kind of like just quiet and do my job. But if I got activated, like, this is my personality. I'm not different in life than I am streaming. But I like that clavicular I'm not sure you're familiar with the rising star who's like taking all the testosterone or the looks maxing type things. No. But I mean that was his take of why he's so popular, like because he's real, and you want people that are the same in front of the camera and off the camera, and also like streaming. They want people to live stream and be open and authenticity. And I forget, I was on the SJJ, but I was saying like you're really one of the forefronts of streaming. Like I was predicting like you'll stream till you die, and like because it's just like your personality may be like you were at the forefront of this movement even before streaming with blogging and putting yourself out there. It's probably a psychological disorder. Like me and you may not have the same psychological disorder, but it's probably just having so much trauma, so many people trying to help us, having seen like so many psychiatrists that, I mean, you've said in the past that you just like put yourself out there, like, hey, like maybe you could diagnose or help me because like I've already spoken to everybody and no one else has given me good answers. So that, I mean, that's why I like streaming too, because you're just like, I mean, I don't know if you remember saying that, but I heard that from you and I agree.
Yeah. There was a primary motivation for me wanting to become famous was that if I simply put myself out in front of enough people, I'd get some help.
Well, I mean, also that you have went through all the normal venues that you had went to, and you weren't happy with the advice you were getting through the normal venues. So the alternative, just put yourself out on the internet because just putting yourself out in real life wasn't, you could get more from the internet. And I mean, you could be more like probably me and you would be just as vulnerable in real life as streaming. And we've discussed, it's just in real life, no one actually cares. And there'd never be a point in real life where someone would take more than a few seconds to actually listen to us.
So periodically in my life, I've regularly woken up at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. with this cold sweat that I'm moving in a bad direction or that I'm really wrong about some things. Does this happen to you? And if so, is there anything that you think differently about at, say, 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. than you do in the light of day?
No, because I basically gave myself to like Haredi rabbis, some sort of like Hasidic mission at like 19. Maybe when I was younger, like a young child, like when I was like 10 and younger, I had horrible nightmares and I couldn't sleep, and like all I did was think about death. But like once I became very dedicated myself to Jewishness, that has bound me where like I basically was born again Dooovid, and I don't think anything's going to shake me out of the Dooovid identity. In fact, I take care of my parents. I see people that have known me my whole life, but like I'm more Dooovid than that's. I think I don't know if, like when you became an Orthodox Jew, you still are Luke Ford. Now you're just an Orthodox Jew. But I think like when I switched from like David to Dooovid, that identity, like, so I'd have to lose the Dooovid identity for that to happen. And at this point, I don't think that's going to happen. Like, I've already been Dooovid for over 25 years.
Do you think that the rise of AI is going to create a change in the male-female power shift, in that many female jobs are probably going away, while the socially awkward man who becomes a master of AI can achieve great success?
Yeah, I mean, more and more human interaction is going to be facilitated by AI, and like, so, certainly like for online dating, and like, okay, me and you are maybe like, I never tried it and I'm probably too old or at this point not going to try it. But AI will definitely at some point probably completely take over and facilitate matchmaking, preferences, and maybe even in real life where it's kind of like, oh, you meet somebody and then you get access to their social media, and then you re-examine who they are through who the machine tells them who you are, like through their information through the computer. But it's saying like, at some point, asking the computer about a person will provide you more accurate information than asking the person themselves. And I'm not exactly sure how that's going to change the dynamics of human interaction. I was just looking the AI has gotten extremely well, because like I say things that most people like, what the hell is he talking about? Like, he doesn't make any sense. You're lying. And then I put it into like the AI, and it's able to rephrase it and basically show like what I was saying was sensical, and the AI seemed to understand what I was saying, and like maybe for like pickup artistry, or like I don't know if like Haredim or something like are going to start using it, and it's going to be unclear. But like I think it's going to change everything in terms of there still might be people who don't know how to use it, but either way, it's going to affect their interactions. Like I said, like you're not going to need to ask a person a bunch of questions. You're going to be able to access extremely accurate information, relevant information about people through the computer that will be much more trustworthy than even your most confident sources.
So Mark Halperin says that there are millions of Americans for whom the election of Donald Trump has been the biggest tragedy of their life, their biggest personal tragedy. They take it that hard. Do you think that's true? And can you explain it?
Well, I mean, it's the cognitive dissonance where, I mean, yeah, because as someone who's had an identity crisis and, as, like as I'm just a failed Jew, but losing the identity crisis is painful. And the theory of cognitive dissonance is that people will keep the same identity even after it's failed. And in that sense, like, well, if you're a patriot, I love America, or the Republicans, or whatever your vision of what it means to be a member of America. And then at some point that identity makes no sense anymore. And you enter, like the Erickson adult midlife crisis or something, and have to reinvent yourself, or you just live in the state of like a derangement where you're keeping the same failed identity. And, this point, we talked about narrative identity in McAdams like a long time ago, but I'm not sure how Americans are going to reinvent themselves. And, whatever historically most Americans' identity, what it meant to be American, is going to be unsustainable. And, if that, putting what Halperin says in those psychological terms, like I would say, like if that's what he meant, I agree.
Okay, David, great to talk to you, man.
You too. Appreciate it. God bless.
Okay, take care. God bless. All right, here's a little bit more from Sally Satel.
In fact, I've always thought that spending enough time with a patient would solve 90% of the problems we
right.
But anyway, getting back to
so that's a huge point that Sally Satel, a psychiatrist, just made, that if someone just spends time with you, it can help reorient you into a healthier way, that we have the tremendous power to heal people just through giving them some of our attention. And a large reason that many unsuccessful, unhappy, mentally ill people either join cults or become tribal members of a particular podcaster or blogger's online tribe is that these are the only groups that will talk to them, right? If you're failing in life, if you're making bad life decisions, healthy people are going to be incentivized to distance themselves. And so only a tiny number of altruistic people, or those who are paid to work with the mentally ill, or cults and scammers and podcasters are going to have any kind of connection with you.
Answering your question, your original question, these trends now have become one in which doctors' identity is under some kind of threat, or at least in the trainee setting, where again, we are expected to be interested in doing something about topics we're not trained to do. Politicians debate all the time what to do about these problems. We can't fix them. So it distracts us from what we do know. It dilutes our efforts. And it also, to the extent the public hears about this, it really, really compromises their trust in us.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's leave it there for today. Talk to you later, mate. Bye-bye.